Hi everyone, please subscribe to my channel. Blood Immortal Venerable. See playlist for other chapters and novels. I do not translate the novels. Credits goes to original translator and author of the novel. I only make it as an audiobook so it would be easier to just listen while doing other things. Credits goes to the author of the novel. I convert stories to audiobook for mental health, for multitasking purpose, for accessibility and time saving. Listening to audiobook is also beneficial for people who have disability. It improves our listening skills and improve our English comprehension, vocabulary and other things. So, thank you for listening. Thank you and thank you very much for your support. Chapter 1561, Sacrifice for Zen. All the 3,000 great ways could help you condense godly tiles. In the divine refinement forbidden land, there aren't rules of heavens that have been established. Therefore, it's hard for you to become a true god. With your power though, it is much easier for you to condense a godly tile, in comparison to the others. The strength of Chapman, Caden and the other elites of their races far exceeded that of a world lord and resembled much more that of a supreme lord. However, their power was still at world lord level, because they didn't carry the heavenly destiny and didn't condense a godly tile. That said though, they were world lords who could still exert their power to the extreme. They were more powerful than top-level world lords and could even compete with the supreme lords. If they cultivated the godly way which was suitable for them, breaking through would be completed with ease. Each individual only has a single chance. Thus, success depends on one's own comprehension ability, Holy J explained faintly. Natives from the divine refinement forbidden land stared at Holy J, their eyes sparkling, as if they were afraid to miss or misunderstand any detailed or critical information. This might be their one and only chance. The collapsing mountain races focused on practicing physical strength. The amount of warriors in the divine land who concentrate on cultivating might godly way is actually quite small. But we shall never underestimate the true gods who practice might godly way. If their mastery of power is great, they can break absolutely anything with a single fist. Holy J took a sudden step forward. The invisible force surged out from beneath his feet. His body contour wasn't as big as that of the collapsing mountain race, but everyone knew that body size wasn't the standard of measuring a person's power. At that very moment, and in the eyes of all the witnesses, Holy J had become the embodiment of power, and he could crush anything. In fact, he didn't even exert all of his power, probably less than 10% of Chapman's strength. However, no one could deny that the destruction caused was hundreds of times more than what Chapman could ever manage. Holy J slowly walked toward Chapman, as the invisible power hovered beside him before turning into a teeny-weeny crystal. The colored crystal looked very much like Strength Source. Lo Lord, this is just Strength Source. Chapman had no idea how to address Holy J. Holy J's face revealed a cold smile. The might godly way is the most arbitrary one. You never formed path platforms nor condensed 9 stars, but you absorbed quite a lot of my Strength Source. Thus, you are able to directly practice the might godly way. Upon finishing his speech, he pointed his finger at the tiny crystal of Strength Source which began to glow brilliantly. Holy J then poured this Strength Source into the brains of all members of the collapsing mountain race present. In each of their minds, a colorful strength mansion suddenly appeared. The majority of body refiners in the divine land mainly cultivated the might godly way, forged 8 path platforms and constructed 9 divine stars. But it didn't mean body refiners were obliged to follow this journey. The way imparted by Holy J was to forge the strength mansion. If it coordinated with the strength source of the collapsing mountain race, then one would have a rather strong opportunity at becoming a true god. The whole of collapsing mountain race knelt down to express their appreciation, a pious look combined on all their faces. Caden and Tilton just stared at Holy J in pure awe. When it came to harmony race, they were usually quite good at keeping an indifferent tone and attitude. Yet when something so good happened to them, even they couldn't keep to their indifference. This time, Holy J had really acted upon greatness. He gave everyone direction. Other universes were capped by heavens, but the divine refinement forbidden land was an open world. The evolutionary universe's shackle was the Mahayana lotus flower and Hinayana lotus flower. No one but those who opened the Mahayana lotus flower was qualified to comprehend godly way and become a godly genius. In a certain way, to a warrior, this was a kind of ball and chain. Originally, Zen hadn't opened the Mahayana lotus flower fully, so he couldn't break the reign of heavens. Naturally, he couldn't become a true godly genius. But the natives in divine refinement forbidden land weren't bound by heavens, therefore they were all considered godly geniuses and thus qualified for cultivating godly way. On the other hand though, they didn't have the ability to comprehend godly way without such a shackle. With the instructions given by Holy J, it was possible that they could get a glimpse of the godly way theurgy. And judging from this point of view, the shackle in heavens was also a stimulating factor for any warrior. Once one broke the reign of heavens, it became natural for them to comprehend godly way. Every single native in the divine refinement forbidden land was grateful for the master's gift. Thank you, my lord. If we turn into true gods, we will give our all for you until our hearts cease to beat. Caden said gratefully. Holy J remained unruffled. Every stone and every existence was created by him in the divine refinement forbidden land. Their appreciation wasn't of much importance to him. I did this for the young man beside you. He will go to your sacred places and cultivate there. If you want to express your gratitude, thank him. At his words, Chapman, Caden and Tilton were suddenly filled with deep esteem. Chapman announced loudly, Collapsing Mountain Race is open to you as of right now. Sir, you focus on life vitality cultivation. Skyland Race is definitely your best choice. As the head of Skyland Race, I also welcome you to come at any time. ... Their words came directly from their hearts, without the slightest trace of pretension. Rocher just nodded slightly, pensively. He knew he should lay a solid foundation and would cultivate himself step by step. Until now, he hadn't yet completely understood the laws in Wind Exterminating Valley. Skyland Race was his next step. The warriors from these three races were satisfied with what they had obtained today. In fact, what they gained this time was far beyond their imagination. You are free to leave now, Holy J ordered them. Without a second of hesitation, Chapman, Caden and the others left immediately, their clansmen following close behind. Only the warriors from the universes and those of the divine land stayed put. Holy J had sealed their six senses. They couldn't move at all, and thus just stood there motionlessly. What about these guys? Rocher asked. Leave them alone, Holy J said indifferently, looking out at the warriors from divine land. That was when he turned around and headed toward the cave, hands clasped behind his back. Behind the door was a completely void world. Zen had gotten separated from the divine flame cauldron. The 9 genuine dragon spirits were hovering around the divine flame cauldron. Zen appeared to be unconscious, as if he had fallen into a coma. His hands were hanging lifelessly by his sides. He floated within the void space and kept completely motionless. Black tempestuous flames were rising within the giant divine flame cauldron, so fierce it appeared as though they would devour everything. Even Holy Drew couldn't expose his flesh body in black fire like this. A yellow ray was protecting him. The 9 genuine dragon spirits. All of you are Mike's contractual beasts, Holy Drew said faintly, watching the 9 genuine dragon spirits. Mike is known as the Holy Emperor of Beasts in the Divine Land. Among the holy beings, he has the most contractual beasts. The genuine dragons are predominant among them and there are 49 genuine dragons in total. Do you want to restore your own body or devote your spirit to Zen? Mike loved feeding contractual beasts, especially dragons. Genuine Dragon World was constructed at one side of Evolutionary Universe while he was creating the whole place. This Genuine Dragon World was Mike's beast farm. In Holy Drew's opinion, the spirits of 9 genuine dragons were good refinement materials for Zen. He knew that overall, it would be great help for Zen. We object, 5-clawed golden dragon uttered. The dragon's remarks attracted Holy Drew's curiosity. Mike is your master, why wouldn't you want to devote your spirits to his son? Something happened in Genuine Dragon World. They got our clansmen to abandon us. It's just not the right time for us to devote our spirits. 5-clawed golden dragon replied. To divide the universe constructed by a holy being wasn't easy work. When the universe itself sensed crisis, it would devise to counterattack. Even if the sacred race gained advantages in everything, breaking through to evolutionary universe wasn't that easy, because the evolutionary universe had its own consciousness and would establish an adverse environment. It was like when a troop invaded a country, everything, including the land, trees, grass and rivers, would fight back in silence. The sacred race had conspired for a long time and was well prepared for this invasion. Besides the ancient sorcerer race, the demon knight and the ogre race were also acting suspiciously. Therefore, the celestial position didn't trust these two races. Genuine Dragon World had taken movement earlier. They had incited 40 genuine dragons to rebel, while other 9 genuine dragons had lost their own fleshly bodies. These 9 genuine dragons were willing to help Zen, but they still had to avenge themselves in the Genuine Dragon World. Prior to such, it was only natural that they didn't want to sacrifice themselves. Chapter 1562, 80,000 years. Holy Drew didn't dwell on this matter. He could only be considered half an insider and he would only secretly help Mike with his plan. Never would he get completely involved. After all, he was only a weapon refiner. The only thing he could do was display his specialties to the maximum, which meant refining Zen's body to a stronger level. Dark and light fire array. Holy Drew roared. With those words, he began to activate his divine textures one after another, equally making use of the black flame. The divine flame cauldron was also an ancient treasure within the divine land. The black flame inside such, along with the sun spring essence flame and mixed element flame, was ranked first on the mysterious flame list in the divine land. Holy Drew wasn't proficient in dealing with the black flame, though. To him, obtaining just one of the three kinds of flames would be more than enough. Moreover, all the weapon refiners preferred the mixed element flame, because it was the best choice for weapon refining. The mixed element flame was relatively mild, but the black flame was too fierce, even the slightest mistake would cause the weapon embryo to be burnt to ashes. It was both Holy J's and Mike's choices to refine Zen's body with the black flame. Thus, it was important for Holy Drew to be careful when handling the black flame. A white disc slowly appeared beneath Holy Drew's feet and white life vitality began to circulate around him. Simultaneously, the black flame in the void also began flowing like water toward the disc. As a result, a black and white 8-diagram disc was formed. The dark and light godly way was the godly way that Holy Drew cultivated himself. The godly way had once wielded great glory in the sacred race of the divine land. Due to the sacred race's decline though, from ancient history to today, those who had cultivated it to its pinnacle were few and far between. Not many warriors with this godly way could successfully become holy beings. Holy Drew didn't become a holy being because of the dark and light godly way. On the other hand though, his attainment in this godly way was absolutely extraordinary. His overall purpose in cultivating the dark and light godly way was still to refine weapons. Before this, no one had ever used the dark and light godly way in weapon refining. Following the rise of Holy Drew like a dazzling star, many people turned their gazes toward him. The dark and light godly way became popular among weapon refiners as well. They only had one goal, which was to learn from Holy Drew and use the dark and light godly way to refine supreme chaotic weapons. There were quite a few weapon refiners exploring this godly way in the divine land, but unfortunately, not a single one of them managed to create a supreme chaotic weapon. Furthermore, they all failed to comprehend the main points within. What they didn't know was that the key of refining supreme chaotic weapons wasn't in the dark and light godly way at all. Once Holy Drew had successfully set up the dark and light fire array, he casually waved his hand and Zen's body gently landed in the middle of the array. Immediately, the 8-diagram disc started to revolve rapidly. Generally speaking, he wasn't a man who followed the rules. Although he viewed Zen as a rather ideal weapon embryo, he would not deliberately refine him into a supreme primordial weapon or into a supreme chaotic weapon. Doing so would cause Zen's strength to increase in a short period of time, sure, but at the same time, it would also fix him at this said level. He would be unable to make any progress in the future. This time though, Holy Drew decided he was going to give it a try. You can leave this place first. I'm pretty sure you don't want to stay in this boring place for too long, Holy Drew said to the 9 genuine dragons. The 9 genuine dragons didn't speak, but turned on a dime and headed toward the door. Change the time flow rate. He needs a long refining process, Holy Drew said to Holy J. He left Zen alone on the 8-diagram disc and walked out the door as well. Holy J nodded. Controlling time flow rate was not difficult for holy beings. With a casual wave of his hand, the door closed tightly once again. He began to change the time flow rate inside the door. The time flow rate behind the closed door began dropping rapidly, becoming abnormally slow. 110, 1, 100, 1, 1000, 1, 10,000, 1, 1 million, 110 million. Outside the door, Holy J continued compressing the time flow rate inside. Rocher frowned slightly as he felt the time law escaping from the door. It was as if he had suddenly recalled something unpleasant. In the past, he had stayed in the secret place of Lord of Weapons for 300 years, but that time flow rate had also been changed. In fact, outside of that secret place, only 3 years had passed. This kind of absolute loneliness had messed with and changed his state of mind. What is the time flow rate inside the door right now? Rocher asked. About 130 million. Without hesitation, Holy J continued to change the time flow rate. Even though the divine refinement forbidden land was his territory, he couldn't change the time flow rate without restriction. In fact, the rate of 130 million was actually Holy J's limit. If he continued to slow the time, then the escaping time law would show signs of chaos. The time law was originally quite mysterious. If the time flow rates in the two adjacent places were different, then they would form a kind of time difference. And this time difference contained an unstoppable pressure. The more he slowed the time flow rate, the more the pressure of the time difference would increase. This door was a supreme primordial weapon and incomparably sturdy, capable of withstanding pressure of an extreme strength, and showed no sign of weakness. But if the door were to begin cracking, then chances were that the entire door would simply collapse. The intense time difference pressure was no joke. After the compressed time intersected with normal time, it would produce a terrifying pressure. Originally, this was a powerful method used by warriors who cultivated the time law. Ordinary true gods were already terrifyingly powerful when they slowed the time flow rate to 1/100,000. But now, Holy J had slowed time to 130 million. This was considered pure craziness. If the pressure were to erupt, it would be enough to destroy the entire interior world. 130 million, Rocher murmured to himself, a bit taken aback. A single day out here and yet, 30 million days will pass by inside the door. That is to say 80,000 years. Can Zen bear it? Rocher and Zen were both too young. Neither of them had ever experienced the scale of even 100 years before, let alone a time scale of 80,000 years. It doesn't matter. Zen is sound asleep. To him, this is all just a dream. He doesn't actually have to live through all these years, said Holy J reassuringly. Tens of thousands of years meant nothing to true gods or holy beings. Certain true gods had lived for countless ages up until now and had passed through too many eras to even keep track of, so their understanding of time was naturally different. If Zen, who had only lived for a few decades, were to endure tens of thousands of years in solitude, it would definitely be one of the greatest forms of torture. That was why, directly from the get-go, Holy Drew had tried making Zen fall into a deep sleep. The 8-diagram disc continued to swirl around in circles. The black flame traveled back and forth, sinking deeper and deeper into Zen's body. The golden glow of the Sanskrit words on his body grew brighter and brighter. A beautiful figure quietly emerged from within Zen's body, watching him in silence. Lavender was left inside the door. Ever since Zen had returned from the illusion battlefield, Lavender's attitude had been rather strange toward him. She seemed to be worried about something, and she often appeared to be at odds with Zen. She had even stopped talking to him. Right now though, she raised her head and surveyed her surroundings. Looking at the dreamlike space, she flashed a lonely smile. "This is a good place for me," she said. Of course, she understood that inside the door, the time flow rate was different. If Holy Drew needed a full day in order to refine Zen's body, then Zen would have to lie here for 80,000 years. She had hoped countless times that time would stop, as long as she stayed by Zen's side. No matter how much she wished it, time continued to push her forward step by step, forcing her into an abyss she had no desire to face. But now, time had finally come to a full stop, or rather, it was infinitely close to stopping. If one day passed in the outside world, she could accompany Zen for 80,000 years. If it was 2 days, it would be 160,000 years. And that was a long time for Lavender. Looking at the sleeping Zen, Lavender stretched out a thin finger and gently caressed his face. Although the golden Sanskrit words continued to spin, causing his face to look slightly sinister, his closed eyes still showed a sense of serenity, making her feel strangely calm and comfortable. Unknowingly, this man had become so powerful. Although time in this space moved at an extremely slow speed, slower than anyone could ever imagine, Lavender wasn't bored. To the contrary, she treasured the slow passing of every day even more. A day's time passed by quickly for Rocher, Holy J, Holy Drew, and the 9 genuine dragons. Lavender though, who had managed to stay inside the door, had accompanied Zen for 80,000 years. Chapter 1563, Soul-Sealing Needle. The black flame, flicking its way along the 8-diagram disc, had penetrated Zen's body like small snakes. Then, the black wisps gushed out of Zen little by little. It was known that, first and foremost, chaos turned into dark and light energies. Then, dark and light energies turned into everything. The dark and light fire array was deduced by the great technique of dark and light energies, and it was incredibly powerful. Refining weapon with this technique could yield twice the results, with half the effort. Quite a few true gods in the divine land exerted the great technique of dark and light energies by means of clockwise rotation. Life vitality was actually quite similar to chaos. If chaos was an ordinary energy, then life vitality, in fact, could be seen as secondary energy. Under the clockwise rotation, the great technique of dark and light energies replaced chaos with life vitality and turned life vitality into 8 diagrams. 8 diagrams crushed down and would ultimately destroy the heaven and earth, which was extremely overbearing. However, Holy Drew's dark and light fire array was anti-clockwise. In order to refine a supreme chaotic weapon, such was one of the key factors. Under an anti-clockwise turn, chaos, but not life vitality, was turned into dark and light energies. If Holy Drew refined a supreme chaotic weapon, then it was only natural that he himself would have to prepare the chaos. This time was different though, as he was refining Zen, whose cinnabar field was filled with chaos. As the dark and light fire array rotated, Zen's inner world developed at a constant rate. To Zen, the concept of time became extremely delicate. After sinking into a deep slumber, his body began to grow old. Warriors at the Soul Sea realm had an average lifespan of tens of thousands of years. On the other hand, warriors at the Spirit Supreme realm could actually live anywhere from hundreds of thousands of years to millions of years. 80,000 years wasn't too much for Zen to handle. It wouldn't make him grow too old, nor would it cause him to enter the 5 aging processes. Because she had been accompanying Zen for such a long time, Lavender had also fallen into a highly focused state. A long thin needle was afloat in the depths of her soul. The needle was mysteriously patterned with an abstruse refining technique that had never been seen in the universes. Every demon knight queen would hold a rather mysterious ceremony when she ascended the throne. This ceremony concerned top confidential information in Demon Knight. None, except perhaps a few clansmen, in Demon Knight knew about it. This ceremony had been inherited from ancient Demon Knight. Even Lavender didn't fully understand the function or the purpose of such a ceremony. Lavender wasn't the only one, though. Elena and Shania were equally just as unaware. Once the illusion battlefield was over, this long needle within her soul began to take action. The needle had 2 parts. One rotated left and the other toward the right, giving off crucial information. This information suddenly began invading her thoughts, something that Lavender couldn't control nor resist. At first, the information provided by the needle was incomplete. The constant drive of information had side effects, and suddenly, a strong feeling of disgust came over Lavender. Astonishingly, she began to dislike Zen. Lavender quickly felt confused about her feelings. How could she dislike Zen? This instinctive disgust, this feeling of considering Zen as a natural enemy, affected her in every moment. There was no way for her to ignore it. On the one hand, she had these feelings, but on the other, Lavender knew she was fascinated by Zen. With these 2 conflictive feelings, Lavender had grown irritated. In order to restrain her temper, she had allowed herself to fall into a deep sleep for a certain time. As the information released by the needle grew, more and more of it came to her, and it slowly became clearer, too. Over time, she no longer just had these feelings of hatred for Zen. Oh no, even worse, she found herself hating all human beings. This needle was just like the blood exchanging in the celestial position that Zen had experienced. Blood exchanging was putting critical information into blood. The holder of the golden blood would be given a certain ability or power. But this ceremony, the one held by Demon Knight, was to embed specific information into one's soul. Demon Knight's method was even more overbearing. This was because not only did Lavender acquire a certain ability, but even more than that, her mind had changed, too. The only way she could describe it was as though she and Zen were natural enemies, born to hate each other, like a snake and a mouse. Lavender was rather impotent to resist such a heritage from her soul. And once she had noticed this, Lavender had grown even more silent in front of Zen. She was neither willing to leave Zen's body, nor become his natural enemy. Therefore, instead, she curled up and went to sleep. Although Lavender went to sleep, she felt very worried. She had no idea how things would proceed now, with the needle's effects. Thanks to her wisdom, she had vaguely understood that the Demon Knight held a different position from the human being, and the existence of this needle had explained everything else she needed to know. The planted agents in the evolutionary universe included not only the sorcerer race, but also the Demon Knight. Maybe even the ogre race was a planted agent in the evolutionary universe. The celestial position seemed to be on guard now, though. They were inclined to isolate the Demon Knight and the ogre race when they summoned supreme lords to resist. The needle in Lavender's soul was her nightmare. She was too worried to talk with Zen about it. There was nothing she could do but keep as much of her mind and body as possible in a deep slumber. Lavender woke up when Zen entered the door to be tempered. After she woke up, the needle rotated again. Now, the information emerging from the needle gave her a comprehensive knowledge about the history. To destroy the evolutionary universe, many holy beings created the Demon Knight in secret and placed them in the universe in a very specific way. They had actually planned this nearly 3 billion years ago. They were discreet when they carried out this plan. Unlike the celestial position, who could openly obtain the inheritance through blood exchanging, Demon Knight could only obtain theirs by means of the soul-sealing needle. Blood exchanging could only pass on critical information, and couldn't change a person's mind. In other words, Zen could understand the hidden information in the blood once it awakened at an appropriate time. However, the blood couldn't force Zen to do anything, and all choices and decisions remained in Zen's hands. If Zen felt reluctant to do something, nothing would push him to do it anyway. And the same went for the other celestial position members. The soul-sealing needle could directly manipulate one. Comparatively speaking, the soul-sealing needle was harder to carry out and limited to a certain amount of people, unlike the method used by the celestial position, which could exchange the blood of plenty clansmen. Such was one of the reasons why the Demon Knight had such a unique social structure. The Demon Knight members believed that their three queens were at the core of everything, from the civilians to the supreme lords. With three queens here, all the clansmen of Demon Knight were completely submissive to each of them. Therefore, they only needed to plant a soul-sealing needle in their three queens' souls, by which they would eventually control the Demon Knight in its entirety. These three queens were unclear about their own destinies, but they would once the soul-sealing needle was activated. With this kind of scheming and conspiracy, they had created an entire race in order to overturn a universe. Was killing a holy being really that impossible? I want to root this needle out of me. This idea of pulling this needle out of herself had been long on Lavender's mind. Unfortunately though, the soul-sealing needle was so deep in Lavender's soul that it had already merged with her as one. It now seemed impossible to pull it out. If the soul-sealing needle controlled Lavender's thought completely, there was no way for her to resist. If she couldn't pull it out, she then had to grind and obliterate it. A resolute expression quickly appeared on her pretty face. She had plenty of time to destroy the needle, now. 80,000 years was sufficient to grind the soul-sealing needle. What she needed now was a little perseverance. There had only been a strand of Lavender's soul remaining when it was broken by Elena. She was sure she could recover this time, just as she had recovered the last time, too. Her soul lurked within Zen's sword spirit and separating the two was easy. Lavender worked hard, but the difficulty of obliterating the soul-sealing needle was beyond her imagination. The last time Lavender's soul was broken, her memories were still intact. The soul-sealing needle deep within her connected closely with her soul. As she tried to grind and obliterate the soul-sealing needle, she suffered great pain and her memories slowly faded away. Her memory declined quickly and dramatically. At the end of it all, Lavender couldn't even remember why she had tortured herself like this. She'd had one and only one obsession, to erase the soul-sealing needle from her soul. Because her soul was so damaged, Lavender's statue changed and its light faded again in the Demon Knight race. But the Demon Knight didn't notice the statue's change. The race's many powerhouses were in a state of panic, because they had received a new instruction that they couldn't resist on the day when Sacred Race invaded. Chapter 1564, The Situation. Metal clashed against metal, screams drowned more screams. The violent fighting intensified even more as the evolutionary universe sunk deeper into chaos. Fate seemed to favor the army of the Sacred Race, who continued to advance with unstoppable momentum. They made more noise with roaring tokens every passing day in the universe, which flooded everyone's ears. Then again, the war was related to the entire universe, every race, and every living being. It didn't matter whether one was a mortal, a martial artist, a human, or anything else, none of them could stay out of it. Before the actual war had broken out, the Demon Knight race had been actively preparing for battle. All of the warriors from their sacred places had started to gather towards their race's core supreme worlds. Janus, the lord of the frigid autumn world, and her subordinates had been shuttling back and forth through passageways of various supreme worlds. Their supposed destination was the punishment world, a supreme world where Elena's heavenly punishment palace was located. She was the leader of the sacred place's elite warriors. Generally speaking, the warriors with the lowest cultivation level were at the Soul Sea realm, and the warriors with the highest cultivation level were at the Spirit Transformation realm. The enemies they faced this time were too strong, so warriors below the Soul Sea realm served very little purpose. Janus had only been to the punishment world once, after she became the lord of the frigid autumn world. Since the universe was naturally too vast, it hadn't been easy for her to travel an arduous journey of 100 supreme worlds, even as a world lord herself. They had occasionally encountered warriors from other sacred places of the Demon Knight race, and most of them seemed worried. Provoking words filled everyone's ears from time to time. They didn't know where Maha, the warrior from the sacred race, had gotten so many roaring tokens from, but he clearly annoyed native warriors constantly every day. Ha ha, today I killed 7 world lords. All of them were from the Humanity Alliance. Their names were, Tisk, Tisk, those guys were so weak. I hope I can meet stronger warriors tomorrow, and I'll kill them one by one. Once again, Maha's voice filled everyone's ears. Maha is so mighty. Yes, he is. The warriors from the sacred race began to butter Maha up. Janice's face scrunched up in hopeless despair after the many times she had heard those irritating words. He's too arrogant, she complained. It was true that everyone Maha had killed belonged to the Humanity Alliance. Furthermore, they were human martial artists. Now, Janice and her companions were from a different force, and a different race as well. Thus, should she be so angry? In reality, however, she wasn't the only one infuriated. The elite warriors from the Demon Knight race that she led shared the same sentiments. In fact, all the living creatures in the universe hated Maha with a passion. The Humanity Alliance wasn't the sacred race's only target. The sacred race had unashamedly declared from the very beginning that they would treat the entire universe as their own. It had undoubtedly made them the whole universe's public enemies. Therefore, when the Humanity Alliance was attacked, the Demon Knight warriors naturally got enraged as well. Maha's name had spread far and wide ever since the sacred race had invaded the universe. Even though Maha was only a world lord, his strength was far beyond that of a normal world lord. He had a habit of remembering the name of every world lord he had killed, and broadcasting it to the entire universe through the roaring tokens. Of course, the numerous creatures of the universe all gritted their teeth in hatred as they heard his taunts. Yet, there was nothing they could do. It was even said that Maha relied on his own strength alone to kill the world lords. No other world lord could defeat him in a one-on-one battle, in the entire universe at least. The air was filled with a dull silence, until someone spoke. Master Janice, why won't any Supreme Lord attack Maha? One of the warriors beside Janice asked. The said warrior was quite young, and her name was Lin. She was considered a divine-level talent among the Demon Knight warriors. Her cultivation had been greatly enhanced after she had participated in the illusion battlefield, and now she was at the Spirit Supreme realm. Janice liked her a lot. Janice simply stared straight ahead. Perhaps they have their plans. Since Maha dares to be this arrogant, there's no way that he has no Supreme Lords protecting him. The situation isn't as simple as you think, she finally answered. Such a strategy was indeed effective in building up Maha's momentum, which he used to dampen the morale of everyone in the whole universe. At the very least, all the lower and middle-class martial artists began to complain. Many Supreme Lords had responded ever since the sacred race had taken over the wind-avoiding world. They had used the roaring tokens to call for all the races in the whole universe to resist the enemies together, but up until now, not a single Supreme Lord had actually taken action. As a result, they could only watch helplessly as the sacred race occupied one supreme world after another, and wreaked slaughter after slaughter. In just a few days, Maha had already killed over 100 world lords. But regardless of whether it was the celestial position race or the thoughtless minds, no one still made a move. Even the Supreme Lords of the Humanity Alliance remained silent. It was truly unbelievable. Back then, a border dispute between the Humanity Alliance and the ogres caused the death of a mere ogre world lord. It escalated into a fierce battle between the Supreme Lords of both races. Supreme Lord Illusion, a newly minted Supreme Lord that time, had even almost killed an ogre Supreme Lord. At that time, the powers of the universe didn't think much of the Humanity Alliance because its foundation wasn't as solid as that of the Blessed Buddha Land or the Thoughtless Minds. The Humanity Alliance was just a group of warriors who joined forces together. It was because of that same dispute that the Humanity Alliance's status then entered into a new level of power, and made the universe view them in a new light. However, the Supreme Lords of the Humanity Alliance were still silent now. Such an anomaly confused countless martial artists. After all, staying quiet would only weaken the universe's morale even more. Finally, one of the World Lords of the Humanity Alliance had used a roaring token to denounce Supreme Lord Illusion and Supreme Lord of Oracle amidst their own grief and indignation. He even insulted them, which made them look like a joke. Still, the two Supreme Lords maintained their silence. If they still don't act, then Maha will be more and more arrogant, Lin huffed. Janice smiled at her and said, "It's hard to guess the thoughts of those powerful figures. I believe they will eventually defeat the sacred race." Soon enough, Janice finally led the elites of her sacred place into the punishment world. Elite Demon Knight warriors from hundreds of supreme worlds and more than 2,000 10th grade sacred places were gathered in the punishment world. There were over 6,000 world lords among them, and countless spirit transformation realm, spirit supreme realm, and soul sea realm warriors. So many mighty warriors of the demon knight race had gathered in the same place, who all awaited the queen's orders. Almost all of them believed that they would launch a counterattack against the sacred race. Within the heavenly punishment palace, the dome was deceptively peaceful as a blue tassel from the hem of Alina's skirt dropped on the ground. Her long skirt dragged along for over 100 feet, and above her lovely body sat a delicate face. She looked extremely beautiful and noble under her makeup, but all those cosmetics couldn't conceal her ferocious aura. Alina stood in the middle of the hall with her eyes closed. The long needle in the depths of her soul was still slowly rotating. It couldn't be denied that Lavender felt a deep pain and disgust towards this soul-sealing needle. She would rather sacrifice herself than succumb under its control. Meanwhile, Alina happily accepted the information given by the soul-sealing needle. She even felt some sort of coincidence. While she was an extremely ambitious woman, she didn't have the strength to back those ambitions. Even if she became one of the queens of the demon knight race, it would be impossible for her to lead the race to rule over the entire universe. The demon knight race was somewhat weak compared to the three great powers of the human race, especially on the level of the supreme lords. Therefore, the moment the spirit-sealing needle activated, she suddenly discovered an incredible secret, which made her scream in excitement. She felt so euphoric that she had even summoned several toy boys and made love to them for a few days. Her original plan was only to stir up trouble. Now she had an excellent opportunity as the demon knight race was going to join forces with the sacred race. A green light suddenly lit up on the smooth and hard floor in front of her, then an emerald green vine sprouted and quickly grew out of it. In just a few seconds, a giant flower bud appeared. Plop! The petals of the flower bud suddenly fanned out in bloom, and then Shania, who was dressed in green, stepped out. Compared to the other godly geniuses, Shania's cultivation had grown the fastest. She had reached the peak of the spirit transformation realm in such a short period of time. It looked like she was about to become a world lord. Elena looked at Shania as the corners of her mouth lifted up into a smile. Latonia, you're late. Shania's cold stare sent daggers towards Elena. Shania wasn't that fond of Elena. She had always been immersed in her own research, and had seldom got herself involved in the things of the demon knight race. It had only been a while since she had recently discovered the mysteriousness of the 10th layer of the life law, but the sacred race suddenly appeared out of nowhere and caused a huge disturbance. It completely disrupted her progress. What was even worse was that the soul-sealing needle in her mind released a bunch of information that had nothing to do with her. It was only then that she understood the demon knight race's mission. It was not something she was happy about, yet she had no choice but to follow the soul-sealing needle's intention. She was even more depressed when she came to know the reason why she was able to control the 10th layer of the life law according to the information in the soul-sealing needle. There were some loopholes in the evolutionary universe because the one who had laid down its rules was almost about to die. She had only happened to find those loopholes, which was why she had accidentally comprehended the 10th layer of the life law. They have sent 10 godly geniuses to the divine refinement forbidden land this time, but not me. In fact, the celestial position race has long suspected our demon knight race, and they don't even trust the ogre race, Shania said. So don't think that you can catch them off guard. Of course I know that, Elena proudly laughed. The first step is to convince our people. Chapter 1565, Explanation. The members of the demon knight race were without fail obedient to their queens. This race maintained this structure since its creation. The sacred places of the human race were evolved from sects, while the divine kingdoms were evolved from mortal nations. However, the loyalty of human martial artists couldn't be compared to that of the demon knight warriors. When the sacred places and divine kingdoms experienced chaos, the core martial artists would choose to continue to serve their sacred places or divine kingdoms. At times though, a large group of them would try to escape. When the territory of the Humanity Alliance was slowly occupied by the sacred race, many martial artists chose to leave the sacred places that they belonged to and run for their lives. Some criminals even burned, killed and looted random areas. Hence, the mortals were the ones left to suffer. This would never happen to the demon knight race. The beliefs of their race were embedded in their very bones and ingrained in their brains. Once, when Lavender and Elena were fighting back then, only the upper-level martial artists were in chaos. The lower-level martial artists didn't experience any disturbance because they only followed their own queens. Following the orders of the queens, the members of the demon knight race would go through fire and water without any complaints. This was why the demon knight race remained so united. After finishing her sentence, Elena looked at Shania with an indifferent gaze. With an arrogant smile plastered on her face, she lifted her hemlines as she walked towards the transparent crystal doors of the heavenly punishment palace. The warriors in front of the palace came from various sacred places. They were all elite warriors of the Demon Knight race, ranging from World Lords to Spirit Transformation Realm Warriors, Spirit Supreme Realm Warriors, Soul Sea Realm Warriors. These were the strongest members of the Demon Knight race. Seeing the graceful figure move behind the doors, the warriors of the Demon Knight race immediately quieted down. They were ready for whatever the queen would ask of them. Although the vast majority of the Demon Knight warriors were women, that didn't mean they weren't valiant. When faced with invasions, many world lords voluntarily joined the fight. The large, multicolored doors slowly opened. Elena slowly but surely stepped onto the terrace and took a look down at all the Demon Knight members. Her facial expression was soft, but stern and poised. Shania followed closely behind, standing beside Elena with a calm gaze. "My dear people, it is an honor to meet you," Elena said. "We have gathered here today, with all the elite warriors, because something very drastic and important has happened." The expressions of the Demon Knight members remained intent and focused. Though there were many warriors present, the place was completely silent. Elena's voice was easily heard by each and every one of them. Most thought Elena would declare war against the sacred race. Whenever their universe suffered such a crisis, it was nearly impossible for everyone to stay out of this matter. "As you all know, the sacred race has come to our universe," Elena said word by word. Hearing this, many of the Demon Knight warriors furrowed their eyebrows. "The sacred race has come to our universe. They invaded our universe. Why is our queen saying something like that?" In situations like this, every word the queen uttered was of utmost importance. If the Queen of Punishment were to say anything too casually, it would be deemed inappropriate. Everyone knew she couldn't just make a mistake with wording. "This is an excellent opportunity for us. We will join hands with the sacred race to help them take over this universe, the evolutionary universe." Elena's voice suddenly rose in volume, her face filled with excitement. As for the warriors of the Demon Knight race, they were all stunned at her announcement. At least 70% of the Demon Knight members felt that they had misheard her. The queen wanted to help the sacred race. In the past few days, the warriors of sacred race used the roaring tokens to provoke the various races in the universe. Although the martial artists that Maha had slaughtered were all from the Humanity Alliance, everyone in the universe shared a common hatred for Maha. The Demon Knight warriors all hated the sacred race very much. Why did the Queen of Punishment suddenly announce that she was going to help that sacred race? The silence broke as the Demon Knight members whispered in hushed tones. It was absurd and too much for them to grasp. Gradually, the voices got louder and louder, turning into a buzzing frenzy. It sounded like a gentle storm across the ocean. "What does she mean? Our queen wants us to help those sacred race. Why? Although they obeyed the queen's orders without question, the warriors still had thoughts that ate them up. They were born and raised in the universe, this was their homeland. There was no doubt that they loved this universe. Although the warriors of the Demon Knight race were cold and aloof, they were upright and had a sense of justice nonetheless. Elena's announcement took them by surprise. "Master Janus, why is this happening?" Lynn asked in disbelief. Her face was angry and doubtful, with a hint of confusion. "How is that possible?" she exclaimed. "People asked questions too. My queen, the sacred race is our enemy, so why should we help them?" said one of them. "My queen, if we were to help the sacred race, we would be acting against the will of the heavens," another expressed. "My queen, you're joking, right?" World lords and members of the Board of Elders couldn't help but jump out to protest. The universe was watched over by the same heavens, and the creatures and races within were born under the same heavens. If they were to help a race outside the universe, then that was indeed going against everything they believed in. To them, Elena's decision didn't make sense at all. They couldn't understand why their queen wanted to take such unimaginable actions. Facing the chattering crowd, Shania laughed coldly on the side. "It seems like your first step will be very difficult to attain." Elena's expression didn't change, her flawless, stern face held up despite the commotion. "My queen, even if you had a grudge with Lavender back then, we never blamed you for that. We also forgave you for sealing the pool of faith of Lavender. But do you realize what you're doing now? You are bringing the entire Demon Knight race to the death sentence. This will put us in an irreparable situation," the few elders roared at Elena. Even if they loved and trusted in Elena, her order remained against their will. Every inch of their bodies failed to accept what she wanted. Elena, however, remained calm. If this was in the past, she would have already started killing people. But in front of the elite forces of the Demon Knight race, she knew she couldn't be too brutal. She had to maintain her elegance and poise, no matter what. "My queen, Do you think so too? One of the elders asked Shania. Shania looked quite innocent, but in the end, she still nodded her head. If she had a choice, she wouldn't have agreed with Alina's decision. She had always been immersed in her own research, and this brought her endless joy. The sacred race's sudden appearance disturbed all her plans. She was restricted by the soul-sealing needle and could only do as the needle instructed. Seeing that Shania agreed so easily, the elders couldn't believe their ears, their faces revealing shock and confusion. The character of the Queen of Punishment had always been crazy and difficult to comprehend. However, the Queen of Life was relatively gentle, so why did even she approve of this matter this time around? No one could figure out what was happening. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The discussion grew louder and louder. Pa! Elena reached out her hand, and the Saint Thunder meteor hammer appeared before her. A blue-colored flash of lightning shot out from the hammer, violently exploding high in the sky. There was a clap of thunder in the air. A deafening sound erupted, masking all the discussion and arguments happening below. I know that everyone is angry, Elena said slowly. As creatures born in the evolutionary universe, we, the Demon Knight warriors, have the duty to protect our homeland. However, I want to set it clear to everyone that the Demon Knight race does not belong to this universe. What? How is this possible? We were born in this universe. Why don't we belong to this universe? All of the Demon Knight members gasped as they stared wide-eyed at Elena. Their minds were completely muddled. Elena did not have a better way to appease them. She could only divulge some information to calm them down. The purpose that our Demon Knight race was created was to destroy the evolutionary universe, and now the opportunity has come. Chapter 1566. Going too far. Elena's explanation was not convincing. None of the Demon Knight people present had a soul-sealing needle in their soul, so they had no idea of the origins of their race. As the leader of the Demon Knight race, Elena was the unwavering beacon of faith. It was enough for her to just give an explanation. No one would care if the explanation was truthful or outrageous, because it was unthinkable for them to question the Queen's words. It doesn't matter if you are confused, dubious, or even furious, it won't change the decision made by Latonia and me. All world lords, regroup your troops and remain in Punishment World until further instruction. I will herald the golden age of the Demon Knight. After issuing the command, Elena turned around and left. The crystal doors were shut behind her. She still needed to convene with the Supreme Lords of Demon Knight. Those Supreme Lords weren't as easy to convince as the ordinary Demon Knight civilians. Elena could let them probe the soul-sealing needle, so it wasn't a tough job for her. The next step for the Demon Knight army was to wait for the perfect moment to launch a deadly attack on the human beings. In such a short span of time, Humanity Alliance had lost 200 Supreme Worlds. The Sacred Race's formidable army didn't encounter any strong resistance. At this pace, the Sacred Race could devour the whole Humanity Alliance within 2 years. In Core Supreme World of Celestial Position, the fight had started. A swift and fierce aura radiated from the expansive hall. This aura swept over everything in the hall like countless thin blades. Swoosh! Thousands of tiny slashes appeared in the magnificent hall due to the attack of this blade-like aura. A myriad of scratches suddenly appeared on the wall, the floor, the ceiling, and even on the statues that were made from rare materials. If someone was in the hall now, one would be badly mutilated just by contacting the aura. When will we take action? A sweet and melodic voice asked. It was Supreme Lord of Oracle of the Humanity Alliance. Her eyes glowed like an ignited black gem. The fierce aura earlier was casually set off by her as she couldn't suppress her anger anymore. Aside from Supreme Lord of Oracle, there were more than 20 human Supreme Lords present in the hall. They all kept their silence. The Sacred Race's first foothold was in Spring Race, just beyond the Sighing Wall. At that time, Humanity Alliance already perceived that they would be the first target to be attacked when the Sacred Race initiated the war. Humanity Alliance wasn't lacking in power. Supreme Lord of Oracle was one of the 4 great top-ranked Supreme Lords in the universe. Besides her, Supreme Lord Illusion, Supreme Lord Helm and the others carried good heavenly destiny, too. If they fought with full force when they were attacked, 200 Supreme Worlds shouldn't have been lost in a short period of time. Humanity Alliance had a bad reputation now. Sentient creatures in the whole universe were ridiculing their cowardice. Some world lords who were attacked by the Sacred Race even used roaring tokens to harass the Supreme Lord of Oracle. They blamed her for being a coward when the war started. They felt ashamed of her for being the head of Humanity Alliance. Despite being a woman, Supreme Lord of Oracle had a hot temper. After the Sacred Race declared war, Master Feng told Humanity Alliance not to fight back and continuously withdraw their main troops. Celestial position owes us an explanation, said Supreme Lord of Oracle, staring at Master Feng. Master Feng sighed and said, we have no choice but to endure now. Is this your explanation? Supreme Lord of Oracle smiled coldly. Supreme Lord of Original Sin suddenly blurted out, all hope is not lost. We can buy some time by sacrificing those supreme worlds. Buy time for what? Wait until the 10 godly geniuses grow up and get us out of this situation. Supreme Lord of Oracle asked. Supreme Lord of Original Sin was speechless. To cultivate these 10 godly geniuses, all resources in the whole universe were used. Each of them had perfect talent in their own field. Even the present Supreme Lords couldn't compete with them at their young age. No matter how powerful a godly genius was, it still took some time to grow up. If these godly geniuses had 100 years to cultivate, the current predicament would be totally different. They had just cultivated for more than a year, when the sacred race started to act. Would these godly geniuses become true gods in a few years? It seemed like a daydream. No matter how highly the Supreme Lord of Oracle regarded Zen, almost everyone else thought it was impossible. So many of the Supreme Lords had the wishful thinking to buy time by sacrificing some space. As of now, there was nothing they could do except watch as the universe was devoured by the sacred race. Our master must have had his own reasons as to why everything ended up like this. As descendants of our master, we need to trust him. If we survive the crisis, we will repay Humanity Alliance with our deeds. Master Feng continued. Before Supreme Lord of Oracle was able to speak, a handsome young man sneered beside her and said, I'm afraid we can't wait until that time. Humanity Alliance couldn't sacrifice all of us to buy time for celestial position. Excuse me for a while. He transformed into 2 different illusions, went separate directions, and disappeared. He was Supreme Lord Illusion of Humanity Alliance. Celestial Position and Humanity Alliance stood in different positions. Celestial Position looked at the crisis from an overall point of view and examined the problem from the global stand. Even though the sacred race was really in hot pursuit, they just acquired 200 supreme worlds. It would have taken too much of their time to occupy thousands of supreme worlds in Humanity Alliance territory. From the Humanity Alliance's perspective, they couldn't stand seeing their worlds being occupied by others while they did nothing. Gathered by Celestial Position, all the races joined together to resist against the sacred race. But Celestial Position didn't fight back and just watched when the sacred race attacked them. The Humanity Alliance couldn't accept that the Celestial Position even required them to stop fighting back. This was going too far for Humanity Alliance. The Supreme Lords of the Humanity Alliance understood that the invasion of the sacred race stemmed from the conflicts in the Divine Land. That was the war between higher classes of beings. The Celestial Position represented one of the forces involved in the war. Humanity Alliance couldn't accept the method the Celestial Position adopted. Haha, I only killed 4 World Lords today, including Supreme Lord of Oracle, we have already met once. I am impressed by your beauty. If you'd like to have fun with me, I will halt my troops and won't attack you for 3 months. What do you think? Maha's voice was conveyed by a roaring token. All of the Supreme Lords heard this. Master Feng frowned and thought, Maha's provocation is getting worse. I can't stand it anymore. That's going too far. Supreme Lord of Oracle had a weird smile on her face, which was obviously out of rage. She gave the present Supreme Lords a stern look and turned around to step into the void. Following her, Supreme Lord Helm from Humanity Alliance also left. As he saw the 3 important Supreme Lords from Humanity Alliance who left, Supreme Lord of Original Sin couldn't help but sigh, maybe we made a wrong decision. Supreme Lord of Thunder Punishment, who had been silent earlier, shook his head, too. The time is too short. Maybe we shouldn't have put our all hopes in these young godly geniuses. The head of the Celestial Position wore a complicated expression, too. If no one prevented Supreme Lord of Oracle from leading Humanity Alliance against the sacred race, the consequences could be easily imagined. If the elites from Humanity Alliance completely fell, it would be a great loss to the human race. Master Feng sighed again. He hadn't felt this kind of emotion for a long time. Everything went smoothly since he became the head of Celestial Position. The Celestial Position rose sharply. 10 godly geniuses had been selected successfully and Zen grew rapidly. Everything all went according to plan and seemed to be on schedule. The head of Celestial Position even took all the successes for granted, because the Celestial Position was created by the disciple of the universe's master. Things shouldn't be going wrong. However, a fatal mistake occurred. Sacred race had broken through the sighing wall, which was beyond everyone's expectation. Consequently, the selected godly geniuses didn't have enough time to cultivate. Maybe it's time to counterattack. I will go to visit Win, Master Feng said as he then disappeared into the hall. Chapter 1567. He was asleep for a long time. The celestial position was in a dilemma. The sacred race was on a roll. There was no stopping them from conquering many supreme worlds. But Win and Master Feng had planned to sacrifice some worlds to buy time. Although the sacred race had a huge appetite, the evolutionary universe was vast that they wouldn't be able to swallow it all at once. So, to afford themselves some time, there was no other option but to sacrifice the Humanity Alliance. When the sacred race began invading the evolutionary universe, the three great forces of human race united. Even Supreme Lord of Oracle and Supreme Lord of Original Sin had put aside their grudges in the hope of defeating their biggest adversary. But the sacred race continued to devour their territories. It seemed that their joint force could not do anything to stop the conqueror. Once the sacred race destroyed the Humanity Alliance, the evolutionary universe would be in trouble. In this situation, differences and feuds must be set aside. Their chance of survival would rely on their willingness to work together. But despite being the only viable option, it was a difficult decision to make. "Sir," Master Feng said when he entered the secret place while cupping his hands as a sign of respect to the old man, Win. Win was floating in the air with his legs crossed when Master Feng came in. The old man was surrounded by a continuous stream of bright starlight like an endless meteor shower. He sensed Master Feng's presence but did not respond to the latter's call. His eyes were kept closed as if he was in the middle of meditation on the starlight. Master Feng realized that Win didn't want to be disturbed, so he quietly stepped back to not interrupt the old man's thought. Not long after, more starlight appeared and surrounded Win. They began to form complicated patterns like the constellations in the sky. The number of patterns rapidly increased and started to ascend into the sky. When they reached the top of the secret place, they converged and formed a white band of light. It circled in the sky then began to slowly descend towards Win's head. The band of light began to spread out and all the stars in the universe emitted light simultaneously. It was nighttime in the universe when all the stars shone brightly, lighting up the universe like it was daytime. Master Feng could notice the changes in the universe even when he was standing in the secret place. It appeared that Win was using a secret technique. Win was the only true god in the celestial position and he was also the person that had activated the bloodline of the celestial position. Being the disciple of a holy being, Win had extensive sacred wisdom about the universe and its events. As the band of light came closer to Win's head, it expanded more slowly. It looked like it had almost reached its stretch limit. Win had not moved since Master Feng found him meditating here. But as the band of light came closer to him, his brows slightly furrowed. When he extended both his hands, a ray of light emitted from his cinnabar field and a light blue crystal shot out from it. It began to circle in front of Win. It was an octagon-shaped crystal. At first glance, Master Feng thought it was an 8-diagram talisman, and he felt an eternal aura vibrating from the octagon-shaped crystal. That is Win's godly tile. It has left his body. Master Feng thought as his eyes were wide open in astonishment. He had heard about the godly tile, but he never imagined he would see one with his own eyes. Meanwhile, even after the godly plate appeared, the starlight emitting from Win's body did not diminish. Instead, it even grew brighter. The speed at which the band of light above his head spread out became more rapid. Condense. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The specks of starlight simultaneously darted towards Win's head and converged with the band of light. It appeared that the old man intended to pull the band of light into his mind. When the band of light was only about 2 inches away from his head, a cracking sound resonated from it. Crack. The band of light was suddenly disassembled back into complicated patterns on top of Win's head. And soon after, the patterns made of starlight completely vanished into thin air. Win's face immediately darkened. What the, why? From the look on Win's eyes, one could deduce that this true god felt disappointed. It could only mean that what he was doing was very essential. But what exactly happened that made this true god feel dejected? "Sir, you," Master Feng was quick to ask when he saw Win's eyes opened. Win glanced at Master Feng and sighed. "I was using the Grand Star technique just to fully utilize the power of all the stars." The Grand Star technique was a special technique which belonged to the Star Godly Way of the 3000 Godly Ways. Utilize the power of the stars. What are you planning to do with it? Master Feng was a bit confused at what Win was trying to say. Win continued, "I want to take over the entire evolutionary universe. If I can control the entire universe, then I can use the 100,000 supreme worlds as substitutes and my strength can be enhanced. If I succeed, then even the true god of the sacred race won't be able to defeat me. Take control of the universe and usurp the heavens." Master Feng looked shocked. Win nodded his head and a strange expression appeared on his face. My master's body is already halfway into decay. Without any consciousness, he shouldn't be able to control the entire universe right now. If that's the case, then I'll take over the entire universe. But just now, I felt a strange power preventing me from doing it. I don't understand why. This was not Win's first attempt at taking over the evolutionary universe. Master Feng's eyes widened in disbelief. He cleared his throat then said, previously there was a time when the sorcerer race had secretly laid out an array at the backside of a great world to usurp the heavens but failed. Perhaps there is indeed a power that is blocking anyone from doing so. Master Feng was pertaining to the time when they fought with the sorcerer race and the torch dragon. The sorcerer race had activated that array to fuse with the will of the great worlds. The sorcerer race seemed to be doing fine until the last step when they were repelled by a mysterious force. At that time, they suspected that there was a traitor among the sorcerer race, but as the remaining warriors of the sorcerer race were cleared, still nothing happened to the heavens. So the previous guess proved to be wrong. Until today, no one still knew what exactly happened. Now, even with Win's Grand Star technique, he still had failed to assimilate into the heavens. He was also repelled by a kind of power. It felt as if the heavens had already been in someone's control and anyone else had been blocked out. What Master Feng didn't know was it was Zen who had fused with the heavens. Zen had already fused with the will of the great worlds and the will continued to move along the ascending passageways towards the supreme worlds. And even though Zen already left the evolutionary universe for the divine refinement forbidden land, it would still be impossible for anyone, even for Win, to get in or take control of the heavens. After his failed attempt, Win had a look of regret on his face. He was so close to successfully fusing with the heavens and taking control of the entire evolutionary universe. If that happened, he could have secured a place in the evolutionary universe, and even if the sacred race sent out several true gods to fight at the same time, they would still be unable to do anything to him. So, what are you doing here? Win stared at Master Feng and asked. Master Feng began to report to Win the responses from the several Supreme Lords of the Humanity Alliance. After hearing the report, Win couldn't help but shake his head in dismay. This is ridiculous. They don't have enough men to fight. They only have a few Supreme Lords. Even if they summon all the World Lords, they don't stand a chance. They are digging their own graves. But to ask them to sit back and watch as the sacred race invade their territories, that is quite cruel. Master Feng shook his head and said. Master Feng could understand the reactions of the Supreme Lord of Oracle and the other Supreme Lords. He could not stand watching the sacred race slowly destroying the human alliance's territories. Win could not argue with that anymore as he knew what Master Feng was trying to convey. He sighed and said, fine. If they want to fight, we might as well join them. This time, I will use the power of the stars to help them win. We'll not wait for the godly geniuses to return, Master Feng asked. According to Win, the divine refinement forbidden land was an extraordinary sacred place for cultivation. The idea of sending the godly geniuses to this cultivation place was from the old man as well. And since it was an instruction from a true god, Master Feng didn't bother to ask and just sent them into the cultivation place. But he had no idea when they would come back. We can't wait here doing nothing. We must help the Humanity Alliance. We can slow down the sacred race's invasion until the godly geniuses are back, Win said with a worried face. Win was Mike's disciple. He had taught him everything he knew about martial arts. Mike's wisdom was embodied by his disciples and they believed that their master's plans could turn even the most difficult situation into a success. That was why, no matter how bad the situation was, Win had never lost his confidence. But this time was different. Win had not that much confidence that they could win in this situation. As a true god, he knew about the divine refinement forbidden land. It was indeed an extraordinary sacred place for cultivation built by Holy J from the divine land. However, no matter how magical this divine refinement forbidden land was, it was impossible to improve the strength of these godly geniuses to a level enough to save the evolutionary universe in just a short period of time. There was just no way. The evolutionary universe and the divine refinement forbidden land observed the same time flow rate. Win, who was in the evolutionary universe, decided to finally lend a hand to the Humanity Alliance. Meanwhile in the divine refinement forbidden land, Zen was resting when his eyelids slightly trembled and suddenly opened. Then, a golden afterglow entered his pupils and rapidly rotated until it gradually dissipated. Zen looked confused. He sat up and looked around, but his head ached a little from the sudden awakening. What time was it now? It felt as if he was asleep for a long time. Chapter 1568, Lavender's Amazing Willpower. Zen's soul was in a state of near unconsciousness as he slept. To him, it was only a matter of closing his eyes and opening them back up. Even so, he felt like he had slept for far too long. Having just awoken, Zen was still dazed. Once he adapted to the surrounding light, he took notice of Lavender. She was curled up like a baby, her eyes closed as she lay motionless beside him. At this moment, Zen could feel how extremely weak her soul was, as if it had suffered some great injury. Although her soul had already been completely restored, she lacked a complete body, she had stayed as his sword spirit. Lavender, Zen called out. When he received no response, he had his sword spirit stand up to stretch her body. Since it was originally Zen's sword spirit, naturally, he could control it. But because Lavender's soul was living within it, he hadn't interfered with it until then. It was quite a surprise when Lavender opened her eyes just as he was about to make her stand up. Her pair of crimson eyes had lost the sharp killing intent that once clouded them. Instead, they had fallen into a perplexed state. "What's the matter?" Zen asked. But Lavender didn't give the slightest reaction and only looked at Zen, dumbfounded. During the time inside the door, Lavender had relied solely on her willpower to extinguish the soul-sealing needle. One could only imagine the pain of the soul-sealing needle piercing into her soul. While she erased this needle, she had also severely injured her own soul. The trauma of Lavender's soul wasn't as severe as before. Last time, because of Alina's conspiracy, Lavender had almost lost most of her soul, leaving it fragmented. But her memories hadn't been damaged in the slightest that time. But this soul-sealing needle was deeply embedded within her soul. By releasing the information within the needle, one could directly control the recipient's memories. To erase the soul-sealing needle meant that she had to erase her memories along with it. And Lavender realized this as she was grinding out the needle. Just as she removed a part of it, she also lost a portion of her own childhood memories. Suddenly, she couldn't remember where she was born or where she grew up. Once she figured it out, Lavender stopped for a moment. After much consideration, she continued wiping the needle out without any more hesitation. Then, she forgot her name, her race, her cultivation technique, her status as one of the 3 queens of the Demon Knight race, and even why she even had to endure such intense pain in the first place. The deeper the memories, the more difficult they were to erase. For a while longer, she remembered that the young man beside her was called Zen. But in the end, even he was lost to her. She had to rely on her remarkable persistence to continue erasing the soul-sealing needle. And so most of her memories had dissipated. Her soul had become no different from a blank sheet of paper. She was like a newborn baby, unconscious, and unknowing about how to look at the world. At this point, she was incapable of understanding her surroundings. Although she could see Zen, she had no idea what was in front of her. Zen's eyebrows furrowed, he realized that something was amiss. Although Lavender's attitude was already rather strange before, it wasn't like this. With a wave of his hand, Lavender turned into specks of red light that circled the air for a moment before returning to his body. What happened while he was asleep? Could it be that she ended up like this because of Holy Drew helping him refine his body? With that thought, Zen suddenly floated into the air and opened the door in the void. Zen and Lavender had spent 80,000 years there, while only a day had passed for the warriors in the outside world. When they saw Zen coming, Holy J, Holy Drew, Rocher, and the souls of the 9 genuine dragons all rushed over. "Congratulations, Zen," Rocher greeted with a smile. Seeing Rocher was quite a surprise, but Zen was still too worried about Lavender to wonder about it. After giving Rocher a nod, he turned to Holy J and asked, "What happened while I was asleep? What did you do to Lavender?" During this trip, Zen's only goal was to cultivate in the divine refinement Forbidden Land to increase his own strength. He would have paid any price to grow stronger, but he couldn't afford anyone hurting his friends. Zen had even suspected Holy Drew of refining a part of Lavender's soul. He was wrong about Holy Drew. Although Holy Drew once had such impulses, he didn't really think highly of Lavender's soul. The 9 genuine dragons were much suitable materials, and he wanted to refine them, but they refused his request. In the face of Zen's questioning, Holy Drew stared at him with a cold sneer. From the moment Zen stepped out of the door, Holy Drew had been sizing up his own work. Without a doubt, it could make him proud. He decided to ignore his question. "Lavender, you mean your sword spirit?" Holy J asked. Zen nodded in response. After the door was closed, they discovered Lavender's presence. In the space behind the door was the crafting furnace that Holy J had prepared for Zen. After the time was highly compressed inside, it was impossible for them to open the door again. Even if a holy being were to increase the time flow rate by 30 million times, they'd still have to pay a hefty price. It wasn't an easy task. When Lavender appeared, Holy J and Holy Drew were left baffled. They had noticed Zen's sword spirit before, but they didn't think that it had its own consciousness. A soul was residing within. The time inside the door had been increased by 30 million times. From the outside, the world inside progressed rapidly. It was so fast that even a holy being wouldn't have been able to see it clearly. But Holy J and Holy Drew understood well enough. In Lavender's mind lay a soul-sealing needle. From the looks of it, this soul-sealing needle is the work of Mitchell Howe of the Weapon Refining Association. Holy Drew could identify the origins of the needle in a single glance. Mitchell Howe was a rather famous weapon refiner in the Divine Land. He was one of the top 10 weapon refiners within the Weapon Refining Association. He's from the Mew clan. So this soul-sealing needle must have been planted by Murphy Mew. Since it has already been activated, do I need to intervene? Holy J seemed rather worried. All of them were well aware of the usage of the soul-sealing needle. If the order of the soul-sealing needle was to kill Zen, there'd be no way Lavender would be able to violate the order. With Zen being in a critical period of his body refinement, it was the worst time for him to get killed by Lavender. But just as Holy J finished saying it, he once again looked at the scene before him and decided that he did not need to intervene. Because of the different time flow rates outside and within the door, he had said only a single sentence, but time passed by quickly inside the door. The moment he finished speaking, he could already see Lavender attempting to erase the soul-sealing needle. Since Lavender had expended so much willpower to erase the soul-sealing needle, she was unlikely to bring Zen any harm. With this woman's soul power, wanting to erase a soul-sealing needle isn't easy, Holy Drew said with a shake of his head. In their eyes, Lavender's power was rather weak. Although the treasures that entered people's souls weren't particularly sturdy, their materials were usually rather special. This needle was still considered a treasure from the Divine Land. But the willpower Lavender displayed afterward still moved the two holy beings. For a full 18 hours outside the door, Lavender worked hard, forcefully extinguishing the needle. Although 18 hours outside the door went by fast, around 50,000 years had already passed within the door. This woman's willpower truly went beyond their imagination. She had been doing the same thing for years and years. That's all we know. Holy J recounted what they had seen to Zen. According to my speculations, she truly belongs to Murphy Mew. But since she destroyed the needle, we can say that she has escaped Murphy's clutches. Hearing his words, Zen was stunned. He couldn't help but clench his fists in frustration. He had no idea that he was asleep for so long. Never did he think that Lavender would keep such a secret from him. It was no wonder then that she had acted so strangely in the past. Murphy Mew, the sacred race, Zen exclaimed through gritted teeth. Murphy built the Murphy universe, where the sacred race, the invaders of the evolutionary universe, had originated. Chapter 1569, Time is pressing. It's just a sword spirit. At its level, it is barely of any of use to you now, Holy Drew said with indifference. Zen couldn't help but shoot him a cold glare. Given the two holy beings' strength, they could have definitely prevented this from happening, but they chose to do nothing. It was understandable for Zen to feel frustrated. However, he was soon able to calm down. Holy Drew and Holy J were both outsiders after all. Holy J simply asked Holy Drew to refine Zen's body as per Mike's request. A holy being was a legendary figure, a supreme existence even in the Divine Land. There was no doubt that these two holy beings helped Zen a lot. He couldn't really blame them for not helping Lavender. I can only rely on myself, Zen thought angrily, but he did not let it show on his face. He had initially planned on asking Holy J for help in recovering Lavender's memories. But given what just happened, Zen figured that it was no use asking him anything. Hurry, show me your strength, Holy Drew urged. He did not want to talk about the insignificant sword spirit. All he cared about was his handiwork of Zen's body. A weapon refiner always had to make sure their weapon was up to standards in order to qualify as a masterpiece. Despite Zen's concern for Lavender, Holy Drew's words pulled him out of his worries and made him check out his own body. Ever since he woke up, he could already feel a great change within him, as if this body was totally different from what it used to be. It was as if there was a transparent film around him and this film also had some sort of mysterious connection with his soul. As he thought about it, a transparent film appeared and indeed covered his entire body. What is this? Curiosity was written all over Zen's face. However, Holy Drew did not give him an answer. The weapon refiner wanted Zen to discover the mysteries of his own body by himself. The transparent film looked similar to water that constantly surged on top of Zen's body like second skin. He quickly realized that his mind had the ability to control this film. "What's this?" He repeated his question. Holy Drew simply gave him a wicked grin. "This is a protective treasure. I used a piece of the source of godly tile for this," he told Zen. "I named it the Redemption Armor. Do you like it?" "The Redemption Armor?" Zen's eyes couldn't help but light up in surprise. Deciding to put the treasure to the test, he thought of turning it into a robe to cover his naked body. To his amusement, it did turn into one. "Wow, this is amazing," he exclaimed. The treasure Holy Drew gave him was now connected to his very soul and behaved in accordance with his will. "It can change itself into any shape and color," Holy Drew reminded him. "Just try it, you'll love it." "It can change its color too?" he asked, but Holy Drew didn't need to answer. As soon as the words left his mouth, the robe had turned black. It looked the same as any other ordinary robe and the lower helm even fluttered in the breeze. "Interesting." Zen smiled in amusement. Holy Drew turned to Rocher. "Hey, try attacking your friend with all your might," he told the young man. His words stunned Rocher, who had to look at Holy J for confirmation. Holy J merely nodded, basically telling Rocher to just do as Holy Drew said. Since there were two holy beings present, Rocher didn't think he'd be able to seriously injure Zen. It was with this small comfort that he drew out his sword and trained his gaze at his friend. "Zen, prepare yourself," he growled. The sword in Rocher's hand bloomed with a strong light that made the fire around them roll away in fear. Seeing the sword in the young man's hand was a bit of a shock for Holy Drew. He hadn't really paid attention to Rocher this entire time and just realized that he actually wielded the soaring snake sword. This sword was once the weapon of the Lord of Weapons. All weapon refining methods were created by him. Sabers, swords, axes, hammers, halberds. All of these weapons were created by Chiyu, the Lord of Weapons. His method remained foolproof and superior despite already being so ancient. There was little innovation in the weapon refining history and, after countless divine eras, they could still only make supreme primordial weapons. It was only Holy Drew who managed to forge out a new path by creating supreme chaotic weapons. This was the reason why he was so highly respected in the divine land. His ability and talent to have created a weapon totally different from the ones the Lord of Weapons made was incredibly impressive. The soaring snake sword was one of the Lord of Weapons' famous swords. It turns out that a part of Chiyu's treasures had been in Mike's hands all along. This young man most probably got this sword from him, Holy Drew thought to himself. Rocher raised his sword. The edge reflected light and formed a curtain that served as a bridge between him and Zen. Without any warning, he suddenly rushed towards his friend head-on. Swoosh! As Rocher thrust his sword, the pointed end served as an oversized pair of scissors that cut the space in front of it into two parts. The tip was pressed against Zen's robe. Zen's robe that had originally been soft turned into an extremely hard piece of armor with just one thought from him. Buzz! A crisp sound emanated from the clash between the sword and the robe. Instead of cutting through, Rocher's blade slipped to one side of Zen's robe. It was unable to cut through the redemption armor, but it was at least able to scratch its surface. However, the scratch was only there for a split second as the armor immediately repaired itself in the blink of an eye. Swoosh, swoosh, Rocher sheathed his sword and cupped his hands towards Zen. "Congratulations, Zen, the armor is indeed amazing." Zen nodded and cupped his hands towards Holy Drew. "Thank you so much, Holy Drew, for giving me such valuable armor." He was grateful for their help, but Zen knew they didn't do it simply out of the goodness of their hearts. He was sure there was a condition that had to be fulfilled in exchange for this treasure. It was no problem for Zen. Whatever that favor was, he swore to repay it in the future. "Refining your body was an attempt on my part. I loved the process. However, your body's strength still hasn't reached the level of a first-class supreme chaotic weapon," Holy Drew told him. His words confused Zen. "You'll figure out soon enough," Holy Drew said. He had even changed the young man's body to some extent, but he didn't see the need to tell Zen about it. There was no doubt that the young man would figure it out for himself eventually. Although Zen's body was only as powerful as a supreme chaotic weapon, he still felt significantly stronger than before. He tried activating 1% of strength source from the 9 stars and his body was as sturdy as ever. After refining Zen's body, Holy Drew did not intend to stay any longer. As soon as he deemed Zen's body fit and up to his standards, he quickly turned to smoke and left the divine refinement forbidden land. With Holy Drew gone, Holy J then turned to face Zen, Rocher, and the 9 genuine dragons. "I've received news of the sacred race commencing with their attack on the universe." "They started so soon?" Rocher's heart couldn't help but skip a beat at this information. Even the 9 genuine dragons seemed surprised at this news. Holy J simply nodded in confirmation. The person who stood in front of Zen and the others was only his incarnation. The real Holy J was still in the Divine Land. He had recently gotten news of Murphy asking the sacred race to attack the evolutionary universe. You haven't got much time, Holy J told them. If the sacred race managed to take up the whole universe and destroy it, then Mike would perish. He would no longer be a holy being. Given enough time, the 10 godly geniuses could stay in the divine refinement forbidden land to cultivate for dozens, even hundreds of years. 100 years wasn't long for a warrior. However, time was a luxury they couldn't afford. Zen already knew that they would have to move fast against the sacred race the moment he left the evolutionary universe. He just didn't expect that it would only take their foes a year before making their move. Chapter 1570. Soul-Suppressing Cliff. Despite being omniscient in the divine refinement forbidden land, Holy J could not do anything to help the evolutionary universe. While he was a good friend of Mike, he was incapable of fighting those from the Hall of Holy Beings. Besides, he couldn't help Mike directly because he couldn't disobey the rules of the Hall of Holy Beings. Thus, he could only partake in the nurturing of the 10 godly geniuses. Zen was one of the most important ones among them, so Holy J generously shared his strength source with him. However, such a thing was unimaginable for other holy beings. They wouldn't go so far as to share their own strength source with others. When one had reached the holy realm, strength wasn't the only factor that determined the champion. Still, there were still many specific situations where strength played an important role. Under such circumstances, it was pertinent that Holy J wisely made use of their limited time. He was responsible for the training of all those 10 godly geniuses, not just Zen. All the other godly geniuses including Margaret, Lucille, and Carl had their own missions. However, the resources allotted for them were naturally not as many as Zen's and Rocher's. Holy J had never been to the evolutionary universe before, so he didn't really understand what exactly was going on there. Right now, all he knew was that Murphy had made his move, and made the creatures within his inner world begin to take over the evolutionary universe. Being the ever-perceptive person that Zen was, he asked Holy J why he didn't try to deduce the fate of the evolutionary universe. Holy J said that he was unable to calculate it himself. Actually, the methods of divining destiny only existed in the universes. Thus, even a holy being wouldn't be able to predict the fate of others in the divine land. A thoughtful look filled Zen's eyes. He remembered that more than a year ago, Rocher had told him that the so-called destiny was fake. His exact words had implied something similar. The so-called destiny was merely a path that had been laid out in the heavens for quite a long time. In fact, the divination techniques that were used in the universe were produced by those who thought they had seen through the heavens. It was because the master of a universe had the ability to arrange everything. They could make any living being in the universe and even any piece of matter move according to their will. For example, every step that Zen took was arranged by Mike. However, the divine land was different. Things like a controller or even the heavens did not exist there. It was a world that was freely constructed, and everything within the said world was in a random state. Legends said that a great divination technique existed in some lost godly ways. Not only could it tamper with one's fate, it could also predict the fates of all the living beings in the divine land. Yet up until now, no one had ever comprehended this kind of godly way. Although Holy J couldn't deduce the fate of the universe, he estimated they had 3 years to get prepared, after he heard the information given by Zen and Rocher and measured the power of the fake sacred race created in Murphy universe. He even measured the power of the Demon Knight. After all, Holy J knew about the intentions of the Demon Knight from Lavender, Zen's sword spirit. 3 years is indeed short, but I will occasionally compress the time, to make it enough for you to cultivate, Holy J said with a grim smile on his worried face. It was hard to imagine that the supreme existence of the divine land would ever look like that. Next, you will have to bring the 2 girls from Han clan to Soul-Suppressing Cliff. You must seize the opportunity to develop the relationship with them, he added. Zen could only mentally roll his eyes. He believed that this Holy J had led a dissolute life in the divine land. Of course, Zen wouldn't try to woo Laquisha, as it wasn't in accordance with his nature. In other words, he couldn't do such a thing due to his character, but he still did as Holy J said. After all, he had obtained a black trial tally so he could cultivate at the Soul-Suppressing Cliff. Foreign warriors and divine land warriors alike viewed the divine refinement forbidden land as a place where both opportunities and dangers coexisted. However, the 10 godly geniuses of the celestial position suddenly found that the divine refinement forbidden land seemed to be kinder after a year of training. Their every move went unusually smooth, and they felt a strangeness which caused everyone to be on guard. Only 3 out of the 10 godly geniuses knew about Holy J's existence. They were Zen, Rocher, and Xenia. The rest of them remained oblivious to it. Apparently Holy J had arranged for everything. In fact, moderate training was more beneficial to these people, because there was a huge and immense difference between the strengths of warriors who were forcefully trained and those who had a lot of experience. However, everything was because of one reason: there wasn't much time left. Laquisha and her companions were trapped by Holy J in the cave and had some thoughts about it. However, Zen did not give a positive answer. After all, Holy J did not want the news of him interfering to be spread to the divine land, so he naturally left the matter at that. After Zen had arrived at the soul-suppressing cliff, he realized that Holy J had sealed his supreme comprehension of some godly ways in the place. So far, only a few people had been there. It was a pity that Zen didn't find any records about the emotion-closing godly way. After some thoughtful consideration, he finally chose the most mature wishing spell. However, Laquisha disapproved of Zen's decision. In her opinion, the great wishing spell wasn't a rare godly way in the divine land. Almost everyone knew how to do it. In reality, she was so obsessed with the soul-suppressing cliff because she knew that the internal momentum of soul-suppressing technique that Holy J had cultivated was hidden within the cliff. As its name implied, the soul-suppressing technique was a theurgy to suppress one's soul. One would be able to suppress the souls of many experts after comprehending it. But of course, it would be extremely overbearing, and there were only a handful of true gods in the divine land who had mastered the soul-suppressing technique to top level. Furthermore, only Holy J had mastered it to the holy realm. Therefore, observing the internal momentum of Holy J's soul-suppressing technique naturally benefited a lot. But Zen only practiced the great wishing spell when he had delved into the cliff. She couldn't help but feel a little pity. Still, Zen didn't feel himself foolish. He had always thought that what suited him was the most important thing. Yet, there was a price to pay for the usage of the great wishing spell. If one was unable to make their wish come true, it would result to a handicap or even an injury. Zen had understood that he would be faced with more serious problems in the future. First, he would have to face the crisis of the evolutionary universe. Even after the said crisis had been resolved, he would still have to go to the divine land. Then, he would have to face more powerful existences, and even deal with holy beings there. With his current strength, Zen wouldn't be able to fight against a true god, let alone a holy being. So if he wanted to win by even a small margin, he had to take the risk. While Laquisha berated Zen of wasting the opportunity, Elena was quite impressed by all his actions. It was simply because she was younger, and the way she thought about things was quite different from her sister. Those who had entered the soul-suppressing cliff included Zen, Laquisha, and also Elena, who was apparently also qualified to enter. Holy J put his heart and efforts into creating opportunity for Zen to get along with 2 sisters from Han clan. Although Zen was aware of it, he still failed to live up to Holy J's intentions. Zen couldn't simply disobey his heart to play up to the Han clan. Meanwhile, Kenan and the other guards waited outside the soul-suppressing cliff. He and the rest first thought that they knew a lot about the divine refinement forbidden land. While their own princess did say that Zen would be able to bring her to the soul-suppressing cliff, they didn't believe so. It was beyond their imagination that Zen did bring both sisters there so easily. Unfortunately for them, they could only wait outside in envy as Holy J wasn't so generous to allow them into the soul-suppressing cliff too. Half a year later, when they had left the soul-suppressing cliff, the Han sisters did their best to invite Zen to the divine land. However, Zen quickly refused the 2 sisters' invitation almost without hesitation. After all, he was a secondary creature created by Mike. He couldn't enter the divine land at all with his current status. Besides, he would restore into a mass of life vitality if he forced his way in. What he didn't expect was for Elena to say that she could think of a solution, and for Laquisha to show the same intention. A secondary creature was restored to life vitality upon entry in the divine land. It was the law, and breaking the law had dire consequences, but there were still some who had broken it after countless divine eras had passed. Elena expressed that for such an outstanding person like Zen, her royal father should be willing to help. Zen still firmly refused their invitation. He indeed would go to the divine land, but now was definitely not the time. After all, he couldn't waste any more time because the evolutionary universe was still in danger. Time simply flew by amidst the meticulous but boring cultivation sessions. Each godly genius had made great progress during that time. Finally, almost everyone had gathered in the Dragonflyer races, Valley of Time, in the last year and chose to go into seclusion. The place contained Holy J's perception of time, and the time there was compressed to a certain degree. Therefore, it was the most suitable place among the 6 great cultivation sacred places to go into seclusion. Chapter 1571, A New Path. The Valley of Time was usually the last stop for foreign martial artists in the divine refinement forbidden land. Time here had been compressed evenly. There were almost no fluctuations at all. More importantly, the vitality between heaven and earth was in a calm state. That was the reason why most people would try to break through their bottleneck here. In fact, those who entered the divine refinement forbidden land were either top talents from the universes or elite martial artists from the divine land. All of them were gifted in martial arts, and they could easily break through their current cultivation level, a feat that was insurmountable for most ordinary warriors. After those godly geniuses left other cultivation sacred places, they entered the Valley of Time one by one and began a year-long cultivation in seclusion. The valley was beautiful and quiet. The Dragonflyer race had created a special incense using their secret skill. This incense had the ability to calm the soul, and as it continued to burn, its fragrance would spread throughout the valley. In this valley, caves of varying shapes and sizes existed. The highest, most powerful caves had a time compression of around 80 times, the middle ones had a time compression of 50 times, and the lowest ones had a time compression of 20 times. Since this place maintained a stable time flow rate all year round, naturally, it would be impossible to recreate the scenario Zen experienced, time compression that had reached a terrifying rate of 30 million times. After all, maintaining such a high rate was strenuous, even for Holy J. After the godly geniuses left other cultivation places, the Dragonflyer race's prophet invited them to the Valley of Time. The godly geniuses then began their year of secluded cultivation. Of course, they did that in the valley's best caves. This move caused many groups of martial artists from the divine land to get angry and become indignant. They didn't understand why the Dragonflyer race had given such preferential treatment to a group of outsiders. Secondary creatures, some described them. It was a very quiet year. Since time in those caves was compressed by 80 times, a month's time outside of it would mean that 7 years had already passed inside. Before that, the godly geniuses had already accumulated a lot of experience through many trials in the sacred places. Coupled with several skills they had inherited from the divine refinement forbidden land, they were able to cultivate their own unique characteristics to their highest level. But the ones who had the fastest breakthroughs were Rocher and Nathan. They were able to go from the Spirit Supreme realm to the Spirit Transformation realm within the first month. Nathan even took less time than it took Rocher to complete the process. After breaking through, Nathan left the cave to ask about the other godly geniuses' situation. When he heard that he was the first one to step into the Spirit Transformation realm, he felt pleased with himself. In his heart, he proudly thought that he was the strongest amongst the godly geniuses. After the two broke through, they only left their caves for a day of rest before continuing their cultivation. As a day passed outside, they spent 2.5 months in the cave. Their goal was to become a world lord, so they had to utilize every second they had inside the cave. Xenia was the next to break through to the Spirit Transformation realm. She was able to do it in the 3rd month, and she became the 3rd godly genius who was able to reach this realm. When the 4th month came, in addition to Zen, all the other godly geniuses were able to reach the Spirit Transformation realm. The process of going from the Soul Sea realm to the Spirit Supreme realm and then the Spirit Transformation realm meant that one was expanding his or her inner world. After a warrior entered the Soul Sea realm, his or her inner world would constantly expand, continuously forming many laws. The key reason why Zen had his breakthrough after other godly geniuses already had theirs was because of others' pristine life vitality. The other godly geniuses had absorbed a massive amount of pristine life vitality from the Skyland race. This sort of special life vitality could cause a martial artist's inner world to become even more stable, and could also greatly benefit them as they tried to break through to the next realm. Since Zen's body was filled with chaotic energy, which was an energy that was denser than the life vitality, breaking through to the Spirit Transformation realm was much more difficult for him. But Zen had fully utilized his chaotic energy's special properties. During the 5th month, that was almost 35 years for him, he continuously devoured the vitality between heaven and earth that was available in the place he was in and skillfully transformed it into chaotic energy. Although the efficiency of this transformation was low, it was still progressing step by step. On the last day of the 5th month, Zen finally broke through to the Spirit Transformation realm. Zen's inner world had undergone a tremendous change. It had nearly doubled in size, and the world tree in it had already grown to a height of 10,000 feet. The heavenly spirit race on the world tree had already become an extremely large race. As for the Hao clan and the Totem clan, they had already become two divine kingdoms. Some of their members had even reached the virtual tribulation realm and the life and death realm. Also, a peculiar kind of ice silkworm had grown from the ice tree. This kind of ice silkworm looked like a transparent block of ice. It was virtually indestructible if it was on the tree, but once it left, it would immediately melt. As for what it could evolve to, Zen had no idea. According to the 3-year agreement, he still had 7 months, about 50 years for him left. Whether or not he would become a world lord, he wasn't too confident. The other godly geniuses all had predecessors who had paved a good path. They only needed to rely on their talent to run on the road. As for Zen, who practiced the primal chaos technique, he had been on his own. His path was filled with hardships and problems that could not be solved by mere talent. To become a world lord, the martial artist had to turn their body into a world. That meant that his or her inner world must expand to become a great world. This path had already been walked by countless creatures. Every world lord was the ruler of a great world, but whether the primal chaos technique would help Zen to expand his inner world and to turn it into a great world was a question that still didn't have an answer. But when Zen reached the spirit transformation realm, his inner world changed drastically. As the world tree that he planted grew, its top began to shoot upwards. Its roots, however, were deeply rooted at the bottom of the sea of chaotic energy. Those roots continued to extend downwards, and they finally broke through Zen's inner world. This kind of thing was prohibited to ordinary martial artists. The world tree in the inner world was like a magic cudgel that could stable a sea. It could store life vitality. If an ordinary martial artist were to plant a world tree, then his or her life vitality would increase by half as much as that of an average martial artist. However, no one would let the world tree's trunk extend outside of their inner world which meant that their cinnabar fields would be penetrated, which would bring great damage to a martial artist. Unfortunately, the roots of the world tree were extremely tough. It was like a tiny seed that could forcefully grow against a rock. Therefore, if a martial artist owned a world tree, they would always make sure that they would prune its roots. However, Zen allowed the world tree to grow as it pleased. In the end, the roots stubbornly pierced through his inner world. Zen's inner world was not his true inner world. His inner world was actually in chaos. It only established an unfathomable link with Zen through the cross-world theurgy. After the roots of the world tree reached the bottom of Zen's inner world, it continued growing and even extended into the chaos. When Zen discovered this, instead of being alarmed, he became very interested. The primal chaos technique was not a complete cultivation method and had never been reviewed by anyone. When Zen's master, who was called Bromley by Holy J, wrote it, he admitted that it was his idea but said that he could not guarantee how far this cultivation method could help the martial artist that would use it. The biggest flaw of the primal chaos technique was that it was hard to replenish the chaotic energy. Both the universes and the divine land were filled with vitality between heaven and earth. A martial artist could freely absorb it or replenish it with life vitality crystals. It was the way martial artists practiced and survived. And where could Zen go to find the chaotic energy? Previously, Zen had come up with an alternative plan: use the characteristics of the heavenly ogre fist he had practiced in the past to endow the chaotic energy with the ability to devour things. However, it was not efficient nor enough to transform the life vitality he was devouring to chaotic energy. This was also the reason why Zen's speed at breaking through to the spirit transformation realm was slower than the other godly geniuses. But when the world tree penetrated his inner world and extended its roots into endless chaos, Zen knew that it opened up a brand new path. It is said that the 4 divine trees in the divine land could absorb chaotic energy. If that is the case, then this world tree will also become the divine tree of my inner world. Zen murmured in excitement. Before, he thought that he had a small chance of becoming a world lord. But now, he was filled with confidence. Being able to absorb a huge amount of chaotic energy was the foundation of his confidence. Chapter 1572, The Boundary Cloud. It was quiet. After entering the Valley of Time, the foreign martial artists had chosen to go into seclusion as soon as they could. They wanted to consolidate the things they had obtained in the divine refinement forbidden land. As for the dragon-flyer race of the Valley of Time, they were a race that, simply put, loved peace and quiet. The dragon-flyer warriors had half dragon and half human bodies. Most of the time, they were much like statues. They stood in the same posture for several days without saying a single word. Only when movements in the Valley of Time were observed would they pay attention to them. Plop. Today though, the vitality between heaven and earth in the sky above the Valley of Time began to tremble violently. The energy mixed together and burst out with an explosive sound. The originally colorless and formless vitality between heaven and earth quickly formed into a pale yellow ring, continuously expanding outward to its surroundings. On the surface of the glowing ring, several rhombus-shaped patterns appeared. This is the boundary cloud. Someone has entered the realm of a world lord, a member of the dragon flyer race said calmly, raising his eyes in order to look at the boundary cloud. Inside the inner world of a warrior at the Soul Sea realm, the Spirit Supreme realm, or the Spirit Transformation realm, the boundaries were extremely vague and blurred. In other words, no clear limitations were put in place. Once the warrior became a world lord though, a boundary-forming power would appear within their inner world. Only at that point in time would clear boundaries appear in their inner world, allowing the latter to become a great world. In the process of forming such boundaries, the boundary cloud would be produced when a martial artist resonated with the vitality between heaven and earth. In the Valley of Time, there were many occurrences where the boundary cloud could, and would, be born. Many martial artists entering the divine refinement forbidden land would only leave after reaching the realm of a world lord, and the vast majority of them would only choose the Valley of Time in order to attempt breaking through to this realm. This warrior's boundary cloud can spread out for 20 miles, and it seems that the warrior is a secondary creature, said an elder from the dragon flyer race as he stared at the boundary cloud. Often, the warriors of the dragon flyer race were capable of seeing the boundary cloud. Through the extent of the boundary cloud, they could equally comprehend a martial artist's foundation and potential. Generally speaking, when a martial artist stepped into the realm of a world lord, the condensed boundary cloud would spread out for 3 to 5 miles. In the Valley of Time, this sort of boundary cloud was common. Furthermore, it was known that most martial artists could only do it to this degree. When an outstanding martial artist became a world lord though, things were slightly different. They would resonate with the vitality between heaven and earth, producing a boundary cloud that could easily spread out to a length of 7 or 8 miles. An even smaller number of mighty martial artists could spread their boundary cloud out to a range of approximately 15 miles. And again, a few geniuses from the divine land could actually spread their boundary cloud to 20 miles or further upon breakthrough. These martial artists were known to be extremely rare. Even in the Valley of Time, a single warrior like this could appear only once in many, many years. Overall, martial artists that could spread the boundary cloud all the way to longer than 15 miles would have a 50% chance of condensing a godly tile in the future. There were many ways to obtain a godly tile, through inheritance or by snatching one from someone else, for example. But when it was created by the warrior himself, it was obviously the most suitable and precious. If the boundary cloud spread out 20 miles, then this said martial artist would have an 80% chance of condensing a godly tile. 50% was considered a good probability, but this was seen as really quite high. Right now though, the main factor in play was that the boundary cloud in fact came from a secondary creature. That was truly shocking. I've said it before and I'll say it again. These secondary creatures are very special. There should be a holy being behind them, said another elder of the race. The secondary creatures that the elder spoke of were Zen and his group of godly geniuses, of course. These warriors had a couple traits in common. They were all secondary creatures for one, and they were all personally arranged by the dragon flyer race's prophet. The prophet let them cultivate in seclusion inside the best of caves. This kind of treatment was something that the dragon flyer race had never seen before. For this reason, they knew their origins must be extraordinary. Of course, they didn't know that these godly geniuses had originally been arranged by the master of the divine refinement forbidden land. The boundary cloud in the sky didn't dissipate before a long time, continuing to circle in the air above instead. At the top of Valley of Time, a handsome youth had just stepped out of a deep cave. This person was none other than Nathan himself. He looked at the slowly expanding boundary cloud in the sky and a satisfied smile appeared on his face. Father was right. When one breaks through to become a world lord, the boundary cloud created from the boundary-forming power can truly reach a distance of 20 miles. No one can do better in the entire universe. Any martial artist that successfully entered the divine refinement forbidden land was considered extremely outstanding. Even here in the Valley of Time, a 20-mile-long boundary cloud only very rarely appeared. In this grand era of the evolutionary universe, the greatest boundary cloud had only been a total of 14 miles long. Needless to say, Nathan had far exceeded this past result. Looks like I'm the first to make a breakthrough and become a world lord. I wonder how long it took Zen to enter the spirit transformation realm, he murmured. He had only left the cave once, when he'd stepped into the spirit transformation realm. Therefore, he naturally wasn't clear on how everyone was undergoing closed-door seclusion. This kind of information was definitely not hard to come upon, though. After he learned that Zen had taken 5 months to step into the spirit transformation realm, a look of malicious pleasure appeared on his face. Zen's speed had actually been much slower than his. Looking at things from this point of view, whether or not Zen would have enough time to make a breakthrough and become a world lord was now uncertain. Nathan, on his behalf, chose not to head back into seclusion again after becoming a world lord. Instead, he waited for the other godly geniuses in the Valley of Time. Half a month later, the sky above the Valley of Time began to tremble again. The boundary cloud formed by the resonance of the boundary-forming power and the vitality between heaven and earth spread outward in a consistent fashion. The speed at which this boundary cloud is spreading is extremely fast. Nathan said as his eyebrows shot up. He had just achieved an incredible result himself, and he had no desire to be surpassed in just half a month's time. As the boundary cloud continued to expand, the cloud also continued to lengthen. 3 miles, 5 miles, 10 miles, 15 miles. Nathan stared at the growing, expanding boundary cloud and he wrinkled his forehead. Stressed sweat began to dabble at his hairline. The continuously expanding boundary cloud maintained a fairly quick pace. In other words, Nathan knew the boundary cloud's length would continue to increase. 18 miles, 19 miles, 20 miles. Stop, Nathan said in a low voice while staring at the boundary cloud. Unfortunately but expectedly, the boundary cloud didn't follow Nathan's request. In fact, at the same time as Nathan had spoken, this boundary cloud had already surpassed his own record, spreading out now for a total of 22 miles. As the Dragonflyer warriors saw this, they looked at each other questioningly. Nathan had succeeded a 20-mile-long boundary cloud. They never, not even for a second, had thought that someone would expand a 22-mile boundary cloud in just half a month. 22 miles. It's been so long since I've seen a boundary cloud of such a distance. I can't even remember exactly how many years it has been, said the Dragonflyer race's leader. The Dragonflyer race had been guessing at the identities of Zen and his group of godly geniuses from the start, and now they felt that things were becoming increasingly strange. Was it possible that all of them could activate a 20-mile or bigger boundary cloud? They had reason to wonder. Nathan stared fixedly at the cave at the top of the valley. He was uncertain who created the boundary cloud, but one thing he knew for sure was that he definitely didn't want Zen to be its creator. His level of concern continued to increase, reaching its limits now. He continued staring at the same spot and after a while, he saw Roche leave the cave with his sword on his back. Only then did Nathan slowly heave a sigh of relief. Despite his overwhelming sense of relief, Nathan was still surprised that Roche was capable of surpassing him after stepping into the realm of a world lord. That said though, the truth remained that he would much rather be surpassed by Roche than by Zen. After all, ever since he had participated in the illusion battlefield, Zen had been the one to deal him the greatest blow. Even though he had reconciled with Zen, and had even been saved by him, a certain grudge would forever stay in his heart. Currently, 9 months had passed which meant only 3 remained. Once Roche had become a world lord, no one else had done so for the following month to come. However, in the 11th month, Kurt and Lucille broke through to the same level at the same time. Beneath the influence of the 2 boundary-forming powers, 2 boundary clouds appeared in the sky. Amongst them, Kurt's boundary cloud had spread out for 16 miles while Lucille's had spread out for 18. These results were considered outstanding, even across the entire Divine Land. However, they were still far from Nathan's 20-mile range and Roche's 22-mile length. The 4 gathered together and waited for the rest of the warriors to break through. And that was exactly what happened. 2 days later, Xenia broke through and created a 17-mile-long boundary cloud. Then Carl, Lone, and finally, Lawson made it one after the other. The boundary clouds that they created were all longer than 15 miles but shorter than 20. In fact, no warrior could surpass 20 miles. The Dragonflyer race was very curious and kept a close watch on their group. In the past, a world lord that was capable of producing 15 miles of boundary cloud was considered extraordinary. They never thought that this group of people would have all exceeded this result. I originally thought that there would be another world lord with a boundary cloud greater than 20 miles, but I didn't expect the others to be so worse off, the leader said indifferently. Their cultivation levels are about the same though, and the martial artist that made a breakthrough first has a much higher perception. The ones that came out of their caves later aren't as good as the 2 from before, an elder responded. The leader nodded his head. This sort of analysis was reasonable, and it could be said that one who was faster than others in breaking through was much more talented. It was only natural that the spread of their boundary cloud would be wider as well. From the looks of it, the boundary cloud of the last warrior in this group shouldn't be longer than 20 miles either, the leader said, as he stared at the cave. The last person he spoke of was Zen, of course, who was still secluded inside the cave. As the leader of the Dragonflyer race spoke, Zen was actually still training in the cave, with his eyes closed. Chapter 1573, Zen's Breakthrough. A cave of Valley of Time was completely sealed. Zen was inside the cave, completely unaware of the situation outside. All these years, he often took the shape of an avatar to explore his inner world and develop it. Most of the time, a martial artist did not interfere with their own inner world. The creatures within the inner world formed an ecological chain and thrived. A powerful creature could be born only under certain circumstances. If Zen interfered and provided them with too many resources, then the creatures in the inner world would be incomparably weak. Even their rate of reproduction would start declining. Ever since the world tree had extended its roots into the chaos, it had been able to draw out endless amount of chaotic energy, which was a huge benefit for Zen. The chaotic sea continued to expand, and the central continent continued to evolve. The time within his inner world quickly moved forward. The situation on the continent became complicated. The Hao clan and the Totem clan had already turned into an imprint in history. The queen of the Hao clan that Zen had once rescued, left behind a glorious divine kingdom. Later, it divided itself into 3 divine kingdoms on the continent. As for the Hao clan, when it was split up, it formed many sacred places of varying proportions. In one of the sacred places, the first warrior at the Soul Sea realm was created. Splash! The edge of Zen's inner world was still in a state of chaos. Some intelligent sea creatures were curious about the edge of this world. They swam forward, following the chaotic sea. At this moment, a strange phenomenon happened. No matter how long one swam in this sea, they could never reach the end. It was as if the chaotic sea was endless. Moreover, the moment one turned around, they would instantly return to the starting point, as if the world was an endless cycle of reincarnation. Zen was not the only cultivator to be in such situation. The other cultivators also faced similar situations within their inner worlds. However, this time the situation was different. The group of sea creatures swimming at the edge of the chaotic sea felt a vigorous force descending upon them. The chaotic sea began to stir up violent storms, forming into massive walls. Initially, the sea creatures panicked, but soon they calmed down. Although the storm was fierce, it came to a halt at the edge of the chaotic sea. Several months later, the storm vanished. And at the edge of the chaotic sea, a grayish-brown curtain of light began to form. This curtain of light began to absorb the chaotic energy frantically. Form the boundaries. At this moment, Zen was at a crucial juncture. Sitting upright in the cave, he placed both his hands on top of his belly, while his eyes brimmed with vitality. The primal chaos technique was only to guide him, and so far he had progressed step by step, relying on his own exploration and comprehension. Breaking through to become a world lord was the most crucial step. The light barrier at the edge of the chaotic sea was still extremely weak. With the impact of the tide, cracks appeared on some parts of the barrier. Fortunately, after this curtain of light absorbed the chaotic energy, it also began to continuously release the boundary-forming power, repairing the damage and the cracks that had appeared. From this moment on, there were only 15 days left before the agreed time with Holy J. The other godly geniuses had already left their caves and were waiting for Zen to come out of his seclusion in the Valley of Time. Although the faint fragrance of the Valley of Time was able to calm the minds of martial artists, they were still anxious and restless. Even Nathan had a look of worry on his face. All of them had gone through the experience in the Divine Refinement Forbidden Land and possessed the cultivation of a world lord. They had also received the inheritance of the Divine Refinement Forbidden Land. Both their strength and state of mind had changed drastically. Zen was the only genius who hadn't made a breakthrough. Nathan might not want to admit the truth, but Zen was after all the leader of these godly geniuses. This trip to the Divine Refinement Forbidden Land had taken 3 years. Zen was the only one that hadn't become a world lord, a fact that even Nathan couldn't believe. There is half a month left in the outside world, but there's still more than 3 years left for Zen. There's no need to be so anxious, Lucille said with a smile. Of the godly geniuses, she was one of the 3 to enter the Harmony race to cultivate. The mind-refining tower of the Harmony race was able to temper a martial artist's mind. Currently, Lucille's temperament was even more elegant and tranquil, making her appear more attractive. But Zen has yet to break through. He must have encountered some trouble. Perhaps he has come across some obstacles that he is unable to overcome, Nathan retorted. Rocher, on the other hand, had a calm expression on his face. Out of the godly geniuses present, he was probably the only one who understood Zen the most. After they entered the divine refinement forbidden land, Holy J had spent maximum efforts on Zen and him. But Rocher also understood that he was far less important than Zen. In his eyes, there was no need to doubt Zen's breakthrough to the realm of a world lord. He wasn't even the least bit worried. Besides worrying about Zen, these godly geniuses were also worrying about the war in the universe. All these godly geniuses had extraordinary origins. Their loved ones and their benefactors were almighty warriors of the universe. When the sacred race invaded the universe, these warriors were unavoidably involved in the war. Yet these godly geniuses were confined in the divine refinement forbidden land and were unable to understand the situation of the entire universe. They were naturally worried. 15 days left, 14 days left, 13 days left. While in seclusion, they felt that time was moving at a very slow pace. But once outside, they felt like half a month had passed in the blink of an eye. 5 days left, 3 days left. On the third day of the countdown, a strange phenomenon appeared above the valley of time. The vitality between heaven and earth began to fluctuate violently. He broke through. A hint of excitement could be seen in Lucille's beautiful eyes. Amitabha, that is definitely the boundary-forming power. Finally Zen has succeeded. Kurt nodded his head with a pleased expression on his face. Right now, the godly geniuses were not the only ones paying attention to Zen. The Dragon Flyer race was also very concerned. Although they didn't think highly of the final person who broke through, they were curious as to how large a boundary cloud that person could form. Other than the Dragon Flyer race, there was also a pair of eyes staring at this scene from the highest point of the divine refinement forbidden land. It was Holy J. This little guy cultivates chaotic energy. Logically speaking, the world he creates should be the elementary form of a divine land. So this is equivalent to forming a divine land. I wonder just how much vitality between heaven and earth will he be able to draw in. Holy J thought about it. He did not use an avatar to come here, but used his inner vision to spy on Zen. Plop! Suddenly the crowd heard a rumbling sound coming from above the valley of time. There was a sound of explosion that resonated within the surrounding vitality between heaven and earth. A ring-shaped boundary cloud appeared in the sky and began to spread outwards. However, the speed at which the boundary cloud spread was not that fast as compared to Rocher's, Nathan's, Lawson's, Lone's and the others. But the godly geniuses and the Dragonflyer warriors were shocked to see this boundary cloud. The boundary cloud that formed from the vitality between heaven and earth had a hue of light yellow color. From Nathan to Lone, all their boundary clouds shone in light yellow color. However, Zen's boundary cloud was different, it was grayish-brown. What's with Zen's boundary cloud? That is a very peculiar color, Carl asked in bewilderment. Why is this boundary cloud colored differently? Lawson also asked in confusion. Nathan also looked perplexed as the ring spread slowly. It is said that when a martial artist with purple power body breaks through to become a world lord, the color of the boundary cloud will be a light purple color. But I haven't heard about a grayish-brown boundary cloud. The Dragonflyer warriors were even more shocked looking at the sight in front of them. There were many world lords in the Valley of Time. The Dragonflyer warriors' research on the boundary cloud was much more profound than any other race. Why does this person have this sort of strange boundary cloud? What kind of cultivation technique is this? Even the sound is so loud. However, judging by the situation, the boundary cloud will not cover much distance. At most, it won't exceed 5 miles. You're right, his talent is a bit weaker than the other warriors. Chapter 1574, The Godly Way Guide. When martial artists became world lords, boundaries were placed in their inner worlds. It was comparable to a country selecting a piece of land for itself. And when they reached the world lord realm, the boundary-forming power resonated with the vitality between heaven and earth to create the boundary cloud, which contained a trace of the mysteries of world evolution and recorded a bit of the martial artist's comprehension of the godly way. Martial artists also recognized the boundary cloud as a standard to measure a world lord's potential and strength. The ball of boundary cloud that Zen had drawn was shocking not just because of the color. It gave off a mysterious aura as it kept rolling and rolling. The patterns within it also seemed to contain some kind of mystery. All the martial artists had their eyes glued to the boundary cloud, none of them able to understand just what was happening. When Nathan became a world lord, the boundary cloud he released had a bit of rhombic patterns, the symbol of the truth godly way. The godly geniuses who cultivated the truth godly way could have some understanding of it if they observed this boundary cloud. And when Lucille was promoted to World Lord, the 5 elements annual rings, patterns belonging to the 5 elements godly way, appeared within her boundary cloud. However, the patterns in Zen's boundary cloud were not regular. They were constantly changing, as if all 3,000 godly ways were being shuffled. High above in the divine refinement forbidden land, Holy J was also watching Zen's boundary cloud with disbelief. The reason the living beings within the Valley of Time were attracted by the boundary cloud was because there was a mystery hidden within it that they couldn't decipher. And although they couldn't understand much, they still found it astounding. But Holy J was still a holy being. It was just that the universe he created was rather special. Before he became a holy being, he had seen something similar to this. It's scarily similar to the Godly Way Guide. This so-called Godly Way Guide wasn't actually a book but a ball of rolling brown mist that was very similar to the boundary cloud Zen had activated. Zen's boundary cloud, however, was still incomparable to the true Godly Way Guide, as the Godly Way Guide's complexity was far beyond what ordinary people could imagine. After all 3,000 godly ways in the divine land came from this Godly Way Guide. One glance at the Godly Way Guide was enough to incinerate the souls of ordinary creatures. And because the information contained in the Godly Way Guide was too vast, they wouldn't be able to resist the origin-related information that would flood their minds. And when one's soul wasn't strong enough, that person could end up injured or worse, killed. Even true gods were extremely cautious when facing the Godly Way Guide. If they weren't careful enough, their souls might be severely damaged. Even holy beings could only look at it when the chance presented itself, which was once in a blue moon. Being able to look at the Godly Way Guide truly was a rare opportunity in the divine land, and Holy J, since he became a holy being, had only seen it once. And it was by the Godly Way Guide that he cultivated the soul-suppressing technique. In Holy J's eyes, Zen's boundary cloud was already in its initial stage, but the profound mystery within it was still very vague. As Zen's cultivation base continued to increase, it would probably come closer and closer to perfection. It seems like Bromley's assumption was right. If we let this guy continue to grow and cultivate, maybe he can really create a new divine land. I just hope Mike can hold on till that day. This year, the godly geniuses were cultivating in seclusion and were unaware of the universe's situation. But as for Holy J, he remained well informed of the happenings in the divine land. The evolutionary universe Mike created was currently in a bad shape. The godly geniuses were still in the closed-door cultivation, and Holy J couldn't tell Zen or Rocher the bad news. It would only add pressure to their shoulders and wouldn't bring them any good. The brown boundary cloud spread much slower than the other warriors, but it was extremely condensed and did not dissipate easily. It began to spread in all directions in a low but stable speed. It took only about 3 minutes for Nathan's boundary cloud to spread 20 miles before it dissipated. But now, an hour had passed and Zen's boundary cloud had only expanded 5 miles. Its speed had also slowed down considerably. It seemed like the boundary-forming power was already beginning to weaken. Only 5 miles? Lone asked with a smack of his lips. He admired Zen a lot. It somehow disappointed him that his boundary cloud had spread over 15 miles but Zen's only spread 5 miles. The gap was just too big. Humph, so what if it's only 5 miles? Can't you see what's inside Zen's boundary cloud? I bet you can't make sense of it either. Lucille retorted furiously. You're one to talk. You're just pretending to understand it. Lone responded indignantly. Lucille huffed at Lone's words. The spreading range of the boundary cloud depended on the boundary-forming power. The larger the great world of the warrior's body was, the greater the boundary-forming power was. So when others saw this scene, they immediately thought that Zen's great world was relatively small. Of course, this was because his boundary cloud was compared to those of the other godly geniuses. In fact, the ordinary world lord's boundary cloud only spanned 3 to 5 miles in average. It was just that this group of godly geniuses were all extraordinary and made Zen seem mediocre. When Zen's boundary cloud spread to 6 miles, it was completely unable to move. Everyone looked on with surprise. Normally, after the boundary cloud stabilized, it would dissipate shortly after. However, after ceasing to spread, Zen's boundary cloud continued to float in the sky. Meanwhile, Zen was still sitting upright inside the cave in a meditative state. At the edge of the chaotic sea, the curtain of light was gradually stabilizing, enclosing the whole sea as well as the central continent within it. During this time, the ordinary martial artist's great world would have already been formed. The curtain of light continued to absorb the chaotic energy all the while, producing a tiny amount of boundary-forming power. It was this power that prevented the boundary cloud from dissipating, keeping it afloat above the valley of time. The light curtain needed a lot of chaotic energy, so the chaotic energy surged toward it from all directions. As the curtain continued to absorb energy, the coastline of the central continent also began to descend, even attracting the attention of the humans on it. Within Zen's inner world, some of the human martial artists who were near the sea wondered why the water level of the chaotic sea dropped so fast. The boundary cloud floated in the air for 6 hours, while Zen had spent 120 days in the cave. Zen's face twitched slightly. The light curtain within his inner world suddenly began to emit rays of light, which was followed by an extremely strong boundary-forming power gushing out. Has it completely formed? After the rays of light disappeared, Zen began to observe the light curtain. His eyes gleamed with wonder and his mouth fell agape. Meanwhile, the boundary-forming power erupted outwards like a violent beast that was just released from its cage. It began to violently resonate with the vitality between heaven and earth at the peak of the valley of time. Sizzle. The resonance caused a sharp cry to burst out. It was as if someone had suddenly thrown a large rock into the water, causing a huge ripple. Suddenly, Zen's boundary cloud, which was stagnant earlier, began to rapidly spread in all directions, its speed already beyond the dragon flyer race's understanding. Chapter 1575, The Boundary Wall. This guy is something else. He has finally begun to show his real strength. Lone exclaimed as he stared at the boundary cloud that flew across the sky. He felt that Zen had finally gotten serious. No one could comprehend Zen's actual skills. Nathan clenched his teeth as he looked at the boundary cloud that expanded rapidly in the sky. Worry and terror painted his face. Previously, he pitied and looked down at Zen as he was the only one among the group who hadn't become a world lord. As the godly geniuses of the evolutionary universe, they should at least reach the level of world lords after the practice in the divine refinement Forbidden Land. Their titles were synonymous with their privileges. Only world lords had the right to condense their godly titles and go further to become true gods. Otherwise, they would always remain as godly geniuses. The only way to improve was to surpass the level of a world lord. They were all still young. Blessed with extraordinary talent and incredible perception, these godly geniuses were more powerful than others of the same level. When they were at the spirit transformation realm, they were able to contend against someone like a world lord. However, it still wasn't enough. The ones who could decide the fate of the evolutionary universe weren't the hundreds of thousands of world lords, or the 100+ supreme lords, but the true gods. If these godly geniuses wanted to participate in a battle to save the evolutionary universe, they had to quickly become world lords and then master the godly ways that they cultivated. Right then, as Nathan saw the way the boundary cloud spread, he immediately felt that it was foolish of him to pity Zen before. The momentum of the spread of the boundary cloud was extremely fast. However, previously, Zen's boundary cloud had only spread 6 miles or so. Additionally, even though the speed of the spread of Zen's boundary cloud was extremely fast, there was still a long way to go. It was still small compared to the distance of 20 miles that Nathan's boundary cloud had traveled. The expressions of the godly geniuses that watched the scene in the sky were all different. Still, most of them were pleased to see Zen's performance. Some of them were even a bit proud. After all, Zen was their comrade. The dragon flyer race was stunned by what they had just seen above their heads. Wide eyes and open mouth decorated their faces as they gawked at the boundary cloud. The boundary-forming power was produced within the world inside the body of a world lord. Its impact on the outside world was somewhat limited. Martial artists also couldn't control the speed or the intensity of the boundary cloud as it spread. It was because of this particular characteristic that boundary clouds were used to judge a world lord's strength. Could it be that this boy's boundary-forming power has leaked out by itself? An elder of the dragon flyer race wondered with his eyes wide open as he looked at the sky. The process of an inner world changing into a great world is a natural one. The boundary-forming power is basically uncontrollable. How could it possibly come out? Another elder retorted. However, disbelief was also seen in his face. If it wasn't the case, how could a boundary cloud have expanded like this? Is this possible? How could he manage to do that? Maybe that kid's boundary-forming power is originally mighty and powerful. That's impossible. To be able to make the boundary cloud spread so fast, just how strong would his boundary-forming power be? Is that still a world lord? Quote. The two elders argued endlessly over the matter. Their curious and disbelief led them to be more interested in Zen's boundary cloud. The two of you stop arguing. The head of the dragon flyer race shouted. Let's see what happens in the end. A dignified and respectable aura radiated from him as he reprimanded the two elders. The Dragon Flyer race had speculated about the background of these 9 godly geniuses. It was expected that all 9 of them would give a performance that would surpass any other martial artist from the other races. However, the Dragon Flyer race never thought the performance of the 9 would be so unbelievable. Aside from the distance it traveled, a boundary cloud was also judged by the intensity and speed of its spread. The brown-colored boundary cloud was indeed very fast. However, it was hard to say whether it could spread over 20 miles. So it was useless for them to debate. However, as if the elders had expected it, within seconds, Zen's boundary cloud had ceased to spread. Although the speed at which the brown boundary cloud spreading was extremely fast, it quickly lost momentum and stopped at a distance of 14 miles. It stopped just like that. What happened? Lone curled his lips. It was such a letdown to see the fast spread of Zen's boundary cloud to have immediately stopped. The boundary cloud has not disappeared yet. Don't jump to conclusions, Lucille calmly said with a trace of expectation on her face. Zen's breakthrough should be different from ours, Rocher calmly analyzed. He knew part of Zen's secrets, but he wasn't sure of it entirely as he wasn't Zen. Even Bromley, who created the primal chaos technique, wouldn't be able to analyze the scene before everyone's eyes if he were there, let alone Rocher. The 2 elders of the Dragon Flyer race began to argue again. I already said it before. His boundary-forming power must have leaked out on its own. It might have caused the vitality between heaven and earth to become so unstable, the elder who had spoken up before firmly believed in his own judgment. His face even reflected a smug smile. The other elder only coldly glanced at the sky. His boundary cloud hasn't disappeared yet. His eyes reflected his expectations. In the end, the boundary cloud covered a range of 14 miles. To the ordinary world lords, this could be considered an extremely outstanding achievement. However, compared to the other godly geniuses, it was still the worst. The speed at which Zen's boundary cloud spreading was astonishing, but the distance it finally reached was not phenomenal. It could even be described as mediocre for a godly genius. At that moment, Zen still kept a close watch of his inner world. He stared with eyes full of concentration at the light curtain at the edge of his inner world. The light curtain formed a common boundary wall. If the world were a universe that was created by a holy being, then the wall would be what people referred to as a sighing wall. It meant that even a true god could do nothing to it but sigh. Suddenly, the light curtain began to undergo an extravagant change. Golden dots of light continued to condense on the light curtain and formed golden vortexes. Power and intensity radiated in their glow. Zen was no stranger to these golden vortexes. He had seen them before. When he used the grand weapon refining method to refine his body, these golden vortexes had always appeared when his body touched preternatural flames. As Zen looked closely at the golden vortexes, he noticed that they were inscribed by obscure golden Sanskrit words, which rotated at an extremely fast speed. The grand weapon refining method was obtained by Zen from the divine flame cauldron. It was a cultivation method passed on to him by Mike. The changes and reactions with the golden vortexes were not strange to him. But why had Sanskrit words suddenly appeared on the light curtain when he tried to break through to become a world lord? According to Holy J's speculations, the Sanskrit words should have belonged to extraordinary creatures that had never appeared and whose state of lives had been incomprehensible. Why had these golden words appeared on the boundary wall? Whoosh! A golden dot of light finally stopped its rotation and turned into a huge golden Sanskrit word that was embedded on the top of the light curtain. It was just a golden Sanskrit word, but it hid a massive amount of information. However, with Zen's knowledge, he couldn't decipher it. He couldn't read Sanskrit even though it was in his inner world. He couldn't decipher the Sanskrit words recorded in the grand weapon refining method, either. In truth, within the divine land, there were a large number of people that studied the meaning and content of that type of Sanskrit. They spent an enormous amount of time in the investigation of that particular type of Sanskrit. The moment the golden dot of light was embedded on the boundary wall, a robust boundary-forming power surged out. Suddenly the wall became even more stable. Because his boundary-forming power had activated the vitality between heaven and earth above the valley of time, it caused his boundary cloud to rapidly expand once more. And this time, within several seconds, the boundary cloud had spread to a distance of 19 miles away. Thus, the Dragon Flyer race, the several godly geniuses, and the other martial artists who witnessed the scene looked at each other in confusion. Their eyes and mouth were wide open at the spectacular occurrence before them. The audience couldn't believe that the boundary cloud had another wave of expansion. How is this guy condensing his own boundary wall? Could it be that there are several layers of walls? How could this happen? Where did he get such strength? Lawson couldn't help but sigh while his shoulders dropped. When a warrior condensed his boundary wall, it represented that the warrior had successfully become a world lord. Almost everyone condensed the wall in one attempt. It was almost impossible to condense the wall more than once. However, there were cases that some warriors had spread their boundary clouds twice or even 3 times within a short period. But that was only because their first or second attempt to condense the wall had failed, and they still wanted to break through the bottleneck in a short period of time. Additionally, every time their attempt failed, the boundary cloud formed in the previous attempt would dissipate. Nonetheless, Zen's situation was completely different. His boundary cloud had never dissipated. Instead, it was pushed even further by the boundary-forming power within his inner world time and time again. Moreover, it spread out at high speed. Even the warriors from the Dragonflyer race who had tried to break through to become world lords many times had never heard of such thing, and less so for those godly geniuses. Most of the audience had never seen such an incredible feat. This kind of situation usually happens when the boundary wall is repeatedly consolidated, and the boundary-forming power is activated again and again. I'm really curious, just what sort of changes has happened in this boy's inner world. I'm sure he still has a lot of surprises to show. Even Holy Jay's heart was entranced with curiosity. His eyes observed him like a new experiment. Not long after the first golden Sanskrit word was embedded in the boundary wall, the second golden dot of light also stopped its rotation. It turned into a huge golden Sanskrit word before it embedded itself in the wall. Afterward, the third Sanskrit word followed, and then the fourth Sanskrit word. Huge golden Sanskrit words surrounded the chaotic sea as they sank themselves in the boundary wall one by one. The boundary-forming power spread out in waves. Each wave radiated more energy than the one before. 15 miles. 20 miles, 25 miles. Eventually, Zen's boundary cloud broke Nathan's and Rocher's records. What was even more peculiar was that the boundary cloud that spread was actually stacked with multiple layers. Viewed from the ground, it looked like countless rings that were formed in the sky by boundary clouds. The rings were linked with one another, from smaller ones to bigger ones. As the martial artists witnessed the extraordinary spectacle, confusion enveloped them. How could there be so many rings of boundary cloud that appeared all of a sudden? Chapter 1576. Zen's Boundary Clouds. The boundary wall surrounded the entire chaotic sea, forming a wall that enclosed Zen's inner world. At every certain distance, the boundary wall was inlaid with a golden Sanskrit word. If one were to swim to the edge of the chaotic sea, they'd see a golden light band at the end of the world. When all the Sanskrit words were in place, Zen's inner world turned truly stable as he stepped into the realm of a world lord. Meanwhile, in the Divine Refinement Forbidden Land, many warriors marveled at the spectacle. The Divine Refinement Forbidden Land was actually an enormous cave created by Holy Jay. It was isolated. There were no clouds, rain or snow. But for the first time, the Aborigines in the cave finally saw clouds for themselves. The birth of every golden Sanskrit word could inspire a circle of boundary cloud to spread. These circles looked like wreaths built in the sky, indeed, a spectacular scene. The creatures outside the Valley of Time didn't realize that these were the boundary clouds. When these came into view, they wondered if they were truly boundary clouds. It was known that a warrior could only have one boundary cloud. It shouldn't have been able to cover such a large area. But the largest boundary cloud covered the entire inner circle of the Divine Refinement Forbidden Land. The warriors of the Valley of Time were rendered speechless. And the two Dragonflyer warriors who had been bickering all the while now stared at each other in silence. They didn't know how to evaluate the boundary clouds in the sky and wondered whether or not a boundary cloud could determine the strength of a world lord. If it could, what was happening? Why were there so many boundary clouds in the sky? Soon after, the door to the cave where Zen stood finally opened up. A man shot out of it and hovered over the Valley of Time. When he looked down in the direction of Rocher and the others, he suddenly fell before them. Zen, congratulations, Lucille greeted with a wide grin. Zen, you're the last to become a world lord, Lone remarked, laughing. 3 days before the deadline, the last godly genius became a world lord as well. Basically, their expected goal in the Divine Refinement Forbidden Land was achieved. So the other godly geniuses felt free to congratulate Zen one after another. For a long while, Nathan remained shocked before finally coming to his senses and congratulating Zen. Numerous times, he had been stimulated by Zen, but he hadn't quite adapted to the feeling. When he became a world lord, he began worrying about whether or not Zen's boundary cloud could exceed 20 miles. If Zen went beyond him with his boundary cloud reaching 30 or 50 miles, Nathan could still accept it. But what happened completely exceeded his imagination. It was simply too much for him to comprehend. he couldn't understand why Zen kept surprising him so. With a smile, Rocher walked over to Zen. Judging from the boundary clouds that you created, you're something like a holy being. Rocher, what do you mean? Zen asked in shock. When a holy being enters the holy realm and begins building the sighing wall of the universe, a lot of boundary-forming power is triggered and the boundary cloud becomes just as magnificent as yours. I've never seen it myself, but I would suppose it's about the same, Rocher explained. As a warrior's cultivation level increased, more and more worlds grew in their inner world, of which the range grew broader and broader. Eventually, they'd form a standard universe. The evolutionary universe, for instance, was a standard universe. It had the upper world and the lower world. The upper world included many supreme worlds while the lower world included many great worlds. There were also a few special worlds, such as the Purple Power World and Genuine Dragon World. On the other hand, there were a few non-standard universes, just like the Divine Refinement Forbidden Land they were in. Rocher's voice carried over to every godly genius's ears. Haha, Zen's boundary-forming power is indeed far beyond ordinary warriors. But it is still far from that of a holy being. Still, he's an outstanding warrior, indeed. I'm glad to have witnessed it. Zen, Rocher, and Xenia seemed rather familiar with this voice. All three of them had seen him, it was Holy J. But Nathan, Lawson, Lucille, and the others hadn't met Holy J before, nor did they even know of his existence, in spite of the fact that he had helped them cultivate several times. He had done so through his 6 incarnations, the prophets of the 6 races. He hadn't shown his own form before. Who is it? Nathan asked coldly. Lucille and the rest looked around, looking uneasy. They had just become world lords and had a new keen sense of the world. Although the speaker seemed close to them, they didn't realize it at all, they were all on alert. But Holy J only let out a laugh upon hearing Nathan's question. Neither Zen nor Rocher said a word. Now that Holy J was there, he probably had his own plans. Before long, someone from the Dragonflyer race came over to the godly geniuses and told them that their prophet wanted an audience. Nathan and those who didn't know Holy J were on alert and refused to go. But Zen, Rocher, and Xenia insisted that there wouldn't be any problem, telling the others to go see the prophet together. Inside his tent, the prophet poured each of the godly geniuses a cup of green tea. When Lucille and the others learned that the old man before them was the master of the land they stood in, they realized that all the good fortune they had was thanks to him. In the face of such a holy being, even the proud Nathan didn't dare show any arrogance. His pride came from his own talent and family background. But he had no knowledge of Zen's origins. Though Zen had undeniably amazing talent, Nathan thought that his background had to be far inferior to his. His father was one of the most respected supreme lords in the universe, after all. But in front of this old man, his father, Supreme Lord of Original Sin, was a nobody. The old man was a holy being. Nathan couldn't even estimate how strong of one he was. It was said that even a true god might not be able to see a holy being in their entire life. After exchanging greetings, Holy J started. 3 years have passed. You should return to the evolutionary universe now. In these 3 years, they had been missing their clans, their families, and the situation in the evolutionary universe each day. They didn't have a good channel of understanding the situation. Naturally, they had many worries. When they heard Holy J's announcement, Lucille took it upon herself to ask, Holy J, how is the evolutionary universe now? The situation is rather bad. The human race has lost 3 supreme lords, Holy J answered honestly. He had never been to the evolutionary universe before, and he couldn't intervene in the conflicts between the evolutionary universe and the Murphy universe. All he could do was help Zen and the others in the Divine Refinement Forbidden Land. If Holy J could enter and leave the evolutionary universe as he pleased, then Mike wouldn't have been bothered to train these godly geniuses. Mike would have only needed to train Zen and make him his successor. Holy J had learned about the state of the evolutionary universe from the Divine Land. The war between the evolutionary universe and the Murphy universe was quite the topic in the Divine Land, and many holy beings in the Hall of Holy Beings discussed it among themselves. It wasn't difficult to get a hold of the news. Since the sacred race had declared war against the evolutionary universe, 2 years had already passed. The sacred race was expanding far faster than anyone had expected. The most critical point was that the Demon Knight race sent troops to assist the sacred race. Because of the Demon Knight race's participation, many forces of the human race were attacked both from behind and in front. I don't have any specific information. After all, it's a matter between Murphy and Mike. Other holy beings have no reason to interfere. I can't touch Murphy now. Holy J himself was a member of the Hall of Holy Beings. Although Mike used to be a member as well, he was on the verge of dying and Holy J couldn't get involved. What should we do now? Lawson asked urgently. There were only about 20 human Supreme Lords. He was afraid that the patriarch of his clan would be killed. After giving Lawson a look, Holy J turned to Zen. There is no better way to win this war. Besides the competition between the Supreme Lords, this is also the game between the true gods of the two universes. If 2 or 3 of you can become true gods, the evolutionary universe should also be able to stabilize and end this war. I came here to send you back. Chapter 1577, Blood Rain. The chances these godly geniuses had in condensing their godly tiles in such a short period of time were slim in Holy J's opinion. The heaviest burden of saving the evolutionary universe still had to be carried by Zen, Roche, and Xenia. The most important part of Mike's plan was Zen. He had already laid out everything for him. He picked a great world and made the necessary arrangements, including creating the entire Luo clan where Zen could grow and experience paternal love. This went the same for Roche and Xenia. Mike had a certain degree of control over things and used it to give the two some advantage. Roche, for example, had the heritage of the Lord of Weapons while Xenia had the heritage of the extraordinary creature. With the 3 of them occupying the top 3 positions, Nathan came at a close fourth since the Xuanyuan clan remained the strongest faction amongst Mike's disciples. Holy J, have you seen Margaret? Zen suddenly asked. He'd been thinking of her ever since he entered the Divine Refinement Forbidden Land. She wasn't weak, but her temper often led her to trouble, which made Zen a little worried. A trace of helplessness appeared on Holy J's face. Margaret is still somewhere in the Divine Refinement Forbidden Land. What happened to her? Zen asked in concern when he saw the look on Holy J's face. Holy J was a genuine holy being. It required quite a serious matter for him to show such an expression. It seemed Margaret might have caused quite a stir wherever she was. Each of the 10 godly geniuses had a role to play. Zen was the main character and an indispensable existence in this universe. Roche was the assassin who could deliver the most fatal blow. Xenia had other uses. Nathan, meanwhile, was Zen's alternate. Despite the meticulous planning Mike had done, there was bound to be a couple of accidents along the way. If, in the worst-case scenario, Zen died, then Nathan would replace him. Of course, the 10 godly geniuses did not know about this. Not even Win, Mike's disciple, knew. It was only Holy J and Bromley who were privy on this matter. If this news was ever made public, then the Supreme Lord of Original Sin would no doubt do everything in his power to kill Zen and have Nathan take his place. Margaret had the most special role in all of this. As per Mike's request, Holy J had to help her become a world lord while establishing the purple power world in her body. Unfortunately, he hadn't succeeded yet. However, it wasn't entirely his fault. Margaret simply refused to cooperate. Holy J couldn't help but feel quite embarrassed. He was a holy being, yet he couldn't even deal with a little girl. The number of times he was tempted to just snatch her soul and tamper with her memories was high. Margaret was indeed very stubborn. Back in the purple power world, her potential was activated under Appearance care and guidance. How could Holy J have the mood and patience to coax her? I will send her back to the evolutionary universe soon, don't worry, Holy J assured Zen. With this promise, Zen found himself feeling more at ease. The other godly geniuses also wanted to go home. They were really worried about the situation in the evolutionary universe. Before sending them all off, Holy J saw it fit to impart a few words. Holy Mike poured in a lot of effort for the 10 of you. All of you are theoretically qualified to become true gods, but that will take quite some time. In the divine land, not even the children of holy beings get this same treatment. If you can help the evolutionary universe survive this round of crisis, then in the future, we will meet again in the divine land. Everyone nodded after Holy J's speech. The celestial position race had been preparing their entrance to the divine refinement forbidden land for such a long time. Meanwhile, all Holy J had to do was lift a finger. In the evolutionary universe, a bright yellow crack appeared in the sky. A figure then burst forth from the crack and fell down. Boom! Zen found himself smashing at the side of a tall mountain. His body acted like a huge axe that directly split the mountain apart, leaving behind a 1,000 feet wide crack on its surface. Zen slipped into the crack and fell into an underground lake that had been formed by the torrential rain that currently poured from the heavens. Crash! Zen's figure quickly shot out of the water and returned to the above ground. When he lifted his head, his eyes quickly widened in astonishment. The clouds were blood red, as if formed from countless drops of fresh blood. Even the distant mountains and plains looked as if they had been soaked by gallons upon gallons of dark red blood. He seemed to have been teleported to a strange area. It seemed that his return this time around wouldn't be smooth as he had hoped. However, he was thrown back by Holy J himself. What reason did he have to send Zen into such a strange place? Perhaps there was an accident that caused this deviation. Zen held out a finger and caught a drop of blood-red rain. He held it up his nose and immediately recognized the familiar, metallic scent of blood. "It's real human blood," he murmured with a frown. It seemed that the situation was even worse than what he had imagined. He didn't even know which supreme world he had fallen into. A warship suddenly shot out from the sky, distracting Zen from his thoughts. This warship was completely black and covered with sharp thorns. It boomed loudly every now and then and was coming straight towards him. Zen simply floated in midair. He did not know which side this warship belonged to, so he opted to just wait. His guess was right. The warship seemed to have noticed the violent commotion caused by Zen's arrival and had come to check things out. This warship belonged to the sacred race. This human blood really stinks. How long will we continue to withstand this? One of the warriors complained. We've already crushed these ants to death. Why is it necessary to have their blood splatter all over the ground? Stop complaining. The Lord has his reasons. What happened just now? How in the world did this huge mountain split into two? Despite what happened though, the sacred race members weren't too alert. Ever since entering the evolutionary universe, they had gone through the human forces that tried to resist them effortlessly like a hot knife to butter. They were unstoppable. Their race managed to sweep this entire universe with ease without any losses. Human. Tisk. Is this human an idiot? He doesn't even know how to run. When did humans become so obedient? Several of the sacred race members roared in laughter. One of them sized Zen up. He was a bit more cautious than the others. Everyone be careful, that guy seems to be a world lord. These warriors of sacred race were all at the spirit transformation realm, which meant fighting with a world lord was still going to be difficult for them. How is this possible? How could a world lord dare to enter this place? One of the warriors asked in confusion. The supreme world they were in had long since been occupied by the sacred race. Any human world lord that entered this area subjected themselves to a death sentence. Nonetheless, the sacred race warriors were not afraid. Zen was a mere human and the sacred race felt nothing but disgust for him. He came here to surrender, perhaps. The past 3 years hadn't been kind. Whether it was a supreme lord or an ordinary warrior, all of them had been pushed back by the sacred race. Hundreds of world lords had already chosen to surrender, with some even betraying their own races to join the victors. A human world lord who suddenly appeared in front of them might mean that he was here to surrender, hence the black warship changed course and headed straight for Zen. Chapter 1578, Attack. Thick smoke billowed in the air as the black warship stopped in front of Zen. A sacred warrior stood at the ship's bow. The warrior was only at the spirit transformation realm, but he appeared intimidating as he looked arrogantly at Zen. The ship's hull shook a little bit before it came to a complete halt. Hey, did you come to our sacred race's territory to surrender? The sacred warrior stared at Zen and asked. The only reason the sacred warrior even bothered to ask was because Zen had a cultivation level of a world lord. Had he been a martial artist at the Soul Sea realm, Spirit Supreme realm, Spirit Transformation or even Life and Death realm, the sacred warrior would have killed him immediately. A creature from the evolutionary universe was no different from a pig or a dog in the eyes of the sacred warriors. They are really the sacred warriors, Zen thought. His eyes narrowed into slits as he scanned the sacred warrior from head to toe. There also seemed to be some information to be gleaned from the sacred warrior's words. He said, sacred race's territory, which meant that this supreme world had already been occupied by the sacred race. Surrender. It meant that there were world lords in the human race who became traitors. The human race had always had its fair share of traitors ever since the ancient times. Thus, it didn't come as a surprise when some martial artists surrendered to the sacred race in order to survive. Do you come for the sake of surrender? The sacred warrior asked again. At the same time, the other sacred martial artists became more vigilant. If this guy did not come to surrender, they might have to be ready to fight. Even then, the sacred warriors already were quite confident in their strengths. Moreover, the 7 sacred warriors present were all top-level spirit transformation realm martial artists. They already had an established set of tactics, which they had long perfected. It wouldn't be a problem for them to defeat a world lord with joint efforts. Lastly, this place wasn't far from their supreme headquarters. If they couldn't defeat the man in front of them, it wouldn't be hard for them to escape from Zen's clutches. A faint smile lit up Zen's face as he floated into the air. Then, he slowly moved towards the black warship in the sky and said, if I intend to surrender, would the sacred race accept me? The sacred warrior's eyes lit up immediately upon hearing Zen's words. It was known that the supreme lords and the true gods at the top were those who decided the result of the war. However, it did not mean that the lower-level martial artists were automatically useless. The sacred race would need a large number of world lords to gradually stabilize the supreme worlds they had occupied if they wanted to control the entire evolutionary universe. The evolutionary universe was far too vast. It was about the same size as the entire sacred race, and that was with its power not included. Thus, it would be quite difficult for the sacred race to take over the whole evolutionary universe on their own. It all boiled down to not having enough manpower. The sacred race had occupied 12 supreme worlds this month, but they had failed to send enough forces to guard those territories. What would most likely happen was in the next month, the human race would avoid the sacred race's main forces and seize back about 10 of the occupied supreme worlds. The war was like two different hands that constantly pulled at a saw. When one side won, the other immediately fought back and turned the table. Such repetitiveness annoyed the sacred race. On the other hand, the sacred race had dispatched more warriors from the Murphy universe, then offered amnesty and enlistment to the human martial artists. It was a part of their plan to use the influence of the human world lords who had joined them to consolidate the supreme worlds they had occupied. In addition, a reward awaited the sacred squad that would successfully recruit a human world lord. The man who can recognize the facts of a situation is a paragon of men. Our sacred race will eventually become the master of this universe. If you can abandon your race and become a member of our sacred race, then of course we will welcome you, the sacred martial artist said in a friendly tone and smiled. It was said that not only would the humans who would join the sacred race be treated well, they could even become small leaders of the sacred race. Powerful warriors were wanted everywhere, especially in a time of war between the two universes. While both sides had more than hundreds of thousands of world lords, the number of warriors below their level was in trillions. But what was important was for the sacred race to successfully implant the heart-devouring bug inside the human warriors who had joined the sacred race. That way, the sacred race wouldn't have to worry about the humans betraying them. If they did, they would only die a miserable death. The several sacred martial artists were surely certain that this world lord in front of them had betrayed his race. If they could bring him back, they would receive a generous reward. To their surprise, Zen continued to ask, "What if I didn't come here to surrender?" The sacred martial artist's faux-friendly demeanor immediately wore off. His smiling eyes flashed coldly as he said, "Are you kidding? If you enter this place but have no wish to join our sacred race, you are courting death." "Yes, you're right, I indeed came here to court death." As soon as Zen finished speaking, his figure moved in a flash and he stood in front of the sacred warriors. A slight crack was heard as Zen's fist collided with their bodies. While Zen's powerful punch wasn't the one to be underestimated, the sacred martial artists were extremely quick to react as well. The 7 sacred martial artists' agile bodies immediately dispersed as Zen's punch came at them. Boom! There was an earth-shattering rumble before the black warship broke into pieces and turned into scraps and fragments that fell from the sky. Just then, the 7 sacred warriors had already formed a circle and trapped Zen inside. Attack! No one could deny that the sacred martial artists were of truly higher caliber than those martial artists from the evolutionary universe. There were a few reasons as to why was such a case. The Murphy universe was a normal universe which did not have concepts like the Grand Era. It was because the universe's creator, Murphy, wasn't like Mike who kept holding on to his last breath of life. Mike had to destroy the heavens and build it over and over again to prevent the life vitality in the universe from being completely drained. That way, he could maintain the flow of life vitality in the universe and maintain the activities of the evolutionary universe at the same time. However, the problem was that the destruction of a universe usually came along with the end of a grand era, which resulted in the loss of some ancient legacies in the universe that couldn't be passed on to the next generations. It was why the universe had to restart every 3.6 billion years. On the other hand, the Murphy universe did not have such problems. Its development was consistent and its next generations were able to inherit many legacies, plenty of which were from the time of the universe's creation. So the comprehension of rules in the entire universe's development were far superior to that of the evolutionary universe. In conclusion, martial artists in the Murphy universe were usually more powerful than their counterparts in the evolutionary universe. It was also the reason the 7 spirit transformation realm martial artists didn't run away when they were faced with a world lord. On the contrary, they even dared to surround and attack Zen. They believed that as long as they cooperated well, they could kill this world lord. Generally speaking, an ordinary world lord wouldn't stand a chance against these 7 sacred warriors. However, they had encountered Zen, who was grown from a seed which was nurtured with Holy Mike's great dedication. Not only did this seed carry the fate of saving the evolutionary universe, he was also tasked to stir a pool of dead water in the divine land and carry out an outrageous plan of Mike. Heavy boots set off into the air as 3 of the sacred martial artists attacked Zen at the same time. Primordial inner demon, they shouted in unison. At that moment, the eyes of the 3 sacred martial artists darkened, and they let out a blood-curdling noise. Their bodies emitted a demonic aura that directly struck Zen's soul and began to disturb his mind. The sacred race was the most powerful force in the Murphy universe, which was known for its orderliness. This trait was demonstrated in their methods of training their warriors to coordinate with each other and form strong teams instead of fighting as an individual. While there were many powers and races in the evolutionary universe, most martial artists fought on their own. Even if some forces managed to develop some joint attack techniques, such things became useless when they reached the spirit transformation realm, or the level of a world lord. It was safe to say that the martial artists of the evolutionary universe were like a heap of loose sand, lacking spirit of cooperation. The heavy gazes of the 3 sacred warriors began to make Zen feel upset, and the negative emotions in his heart began to stir. However, this disturbance of mind only lasted for a blink of an eye before a faint smile appeared again on Zen's face. Zen had entered the mind-refining tower after he left the soul-suppressing cliff. He had suffered all sorts of torment from inner demons in all the 77 floors of the tower. The mind-disturbing technique the 3 spirit transformation realm martial artists in front of him had exerted on him was only equivalent to the inner demon on the 30th floor of the mind-refining tower, which failed to shake his state of mind. It's a shame that you only have this little bit of ability. He then took a step forward, and left no room for his opponents to escape. He gently brushed a slender but powerful index finger against the forehead of one sacred martial artist. The sacred martial artist's eyes widened in disbelief as he stared at Zen. His entire body became slack before he fell down the sky. His resentful eyes never left Zen until he finally crashed on the ground. The sacred martial artist's skull was completely shattered with just a light brush of Zen's finger. The power of Zen's attack had stirred his mind into a completely mess. His soul was broken into pieces and quickly vanished into thin air. Chapter 1579, What is your name? Zen's hand was still raised in the air and he maintained his stance. The remaining 6 warriors of the sacred race stared at him in astonishment. In the evolutionary universe, the sacred race had no trouble dealing with their enemies. The humans did not dare to fight them head-on. Of all the fights between the 2 races, humans hadn't won even once. Moreover, this team had a precedent of killing a human world lord. 3 of the 7 team members were masters of soul attack, such as the previously released Primordial Inner Demon. The next 3 locked the opponent with the Saint Devil Shackle. The last one, the leader of the team, killed the opponent with the Saint Energy Strike, which he had been powering up for a long time. A team of the sacred race usually consisted of 7 warriors. The combined combat strength of the 7 warriors was far higher than that of warriors of the same realms. This type of strategy was aimed at the stronger warriors. If they faced the warriors of the same realms or several enemies of lower realms, the 7 warriors would use another set of tactics. It was not easy to resist the Primordial Inner Demon, released by the 3 warriors. It was not purely a soul attack, but it was combined with some emotions. This not only tortured the soul of the opponent, but also befuddled their mind. Even if a world lord had a strong soul and a stable mind, their mind would be wiped out in a short period of time with almost no resistance. If Zen hadn't trained in the divine refinement forbidden land, the primordial inner demon would have affected him. During the time that Zen had been practicing the god's intimidating strike and comprehending the emotion-closing godly way, the malicious aura had been too much for him to bear. He had become violent and bloodthirsty. But after he had trained in the mind-refining tower of the Harmony race, Zen's warrior spirit had been greatly strengthened. Now, the primordial inner demon had no effect on his state of mind. As Zen came to his senses, he fought back and instantly killed a warrior of the sacred race. The other warriors of the sacred race were still stunned, apparently not realizing that one of their companions was already dead. Zen still had a smile on his face. This smile usually made people feel warm, like they were in the presence of a modest and polite gentleman. But in these warriors' eyes, Zen's image was as terrible as a devil's. That smile looked malicious to them. The warriors hadn't felt fear like this in a long time. They hadn't faced a race yet that was powerful enough to surpass them. As they saw Zen approach one of them, the 6 warriors on the scene were shocked. It was obvious that this guy was someone they shouldn't cross. Leave, Disperse. This guy is not to be underestimated. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Just before they reacted, Zen's slow movements completely changed. His body flashed in the blink of an eye. Before one of the warriors could even turn around, he was lightly brushed by Zen's hand. Zen's finger brushed the top of the warrior's skull. A finger dent appeared in his skull before it totally caved in. The warrior opened his eyes wide in disbelief. He fell down uncontrollably, smashed his body hard on the ground, and was soon covered by a shower of blood. After killing the warrior, Zen didn't stop yet. Most of the time, Zen wasn't a brutal or cold-hearted man. He would be lenient wherever it was possible, but this didn't mean he was weak in character. The sacred race had slaughtered the human warriors in the universe without mercy. As a result, Zen would definitely not spare any of them. The speed at which the warriors of the sacred race escaped was not slow, and they were well coordinated. The 5 remaining warriors all escaped into different directions. This way, Zen could only chase and kill one of them. The other 4 could flee as far as they could in a short period of time. After Zen became a world lord, his speed became much faster than before. He locked his eyes on a yellow-garbed warrior as he chased after him. The warrior in yellow felt a strong gust of wind coming from behind. His face was full of bitterness as he thought, there are still 4 other warriors. Why is this guy chasing after me? He had no time to think of a solution. As a spirit transformation realm warrior, he was unable to deal with Zen, a world lord. According to the strategy formulated by the sacred race, when a group of warriors encountered a strong enemy, they must be completely dispersed to run away as far as they could. At least the enemy couldn't completely eradicate all of them and most of them could escape. The warrior suddenly changed his mind. He decided not to lead Zen away, but turned around and tried to fight back. He knew he would still be killed if he tried to run away, so he'd rather fight against Zen even if it cost him his life. This was the natural instinct of many creatures. Even if the rabbit was chased by a stronger beast, it would turn around to bite its enemy. Life vitality explosion. Boom. The life vitality inside the warrior's body surged out and exploded around him. This was a kind of skill that consumed one's life vitality. As the warrior's life vitality was consumed rapidly, it also expanded at a very fast speed. It turned into countless spikes that emerged all over his body. The warrior seemed like a hedgehog, with all the spikes that protruded from his body. If Zen didn't react in time, he would certainly be skewered by the spikes mercilessly. Zen's natural response was extremely fast. He had enough time to avoid these spikes, but he didn't really need to avoid them at all. He didn't stop in his tracks. He smashed the spikes directly with his own body and turned them into ashes. Crack, crack, crack. As the spikes broke off, Zen was only a short distance away from the warrior. Zen's right hand shot out like a flash. He gently flicked the back of the warrior's head, as if brushing the dust off his body. After that, Zen paid no more attention to the warrior. He turned around and chased after another one. The warrior that Zen's finger had touched suddenly trembled. After a few seconds, his lifeless body fell down to the ground heavily. Apparently, he was dead. The 3rd one is finished. Zen murmured and then chased after the 4th one. The warrior currently chased by Zen saw the scene that played not far away. His heart was in his throat. As he saw Zen chasing after him, he was scared out of his wits. When their eyes met, he felt as if his life was sucked out of his body. He circulated his life vitality and tried to escape as fast as he could. It took Zen just about 7 to 8 seconds to finish the 3rd warrior. Then he launched on the air beneath his feet and flew a distance of about 10 miles. In the blink of an eye, he was in front of the 4th warrior. Aside from having trained in the Harmony race, Zen had also trained in the Wind Exterminating Valley. There, he had learned Holy J's comprehension and experience on various laws. After someone became a world lord, they could utilize the Grand Teleportation. When a Supreme Lord used the Grand Teleportation, they could travel several Supreme Worlds. Zen was still currently unable to do so, but he could still use it to travel 10,000 miles in an instant. The Spirit Transformation Realm warrior had just fled a few hundred miles in a short span of time. You, who are you? You are a mere human world lord. Why are you so powerful? The warrior asked after he realized that there was no point in running anymore. You don't need to know, Zen said with a smile. His ghost-like figure once again flew past the warrior. The moment his finger flicked out, there was a blazing white light under his feet. Zen had disappeared in front of the warrior. He began to chase after the 5th warrior. Then the 6th, the 7th. There was only one warrior of the sacred race left, and Zen didn't kill him immediately. This warrior was the one who had stood on the black warship and looked down on Zen. As the leader of his team, he had the greatest strength. After the other 6 members trapped a strong opponent, the killing blow was dealt by this man. Because it took Zen some time to kill the other 6 warriors, their leader had already escaped 200 miles in such a short time. While he ran for his life, he had almost pushed his strength to the limit. In comparison with the other warriors of the team, he was the most intelligent. He had already realized that Zen would be too much for him to deal with. He never looked back and didn't think about anything else but to escape with his life. He didn't know or care whether his companions were dead or not. At least, he was safe now. I'm finally safe. Just as the thought crossed his mind, a voice whispered in his ears. It scared him to his wits' end. Hi, what's your name? Chapter 1580, including mortals. As Zen finished speaking, his figure appeared out of the void. He floated above the sacred warrior's head, looking down. He resembled a sovereign with the strong and overbearing aura. The sacred warriors were typically proud of their noble bloodlines. In their eyes, all other races were equal, but beneath them. Humans and other intelligent creatures were no different from pigs, dogs, ants, or any other living things. Only the sacred race was regarded different, with characteristics to surpass and even dominate other races. In the Murphy universe, any living being or race could only present themselves before the sacred warriors, living off of their charity and support. The sacred martial artist had never felt such a kind of strong aura before. Zen's inescapable aura made the martial artist feel comparably small. He had a strong feeling that he was about to be forced into submission. But now, he was just facing a human being. Because of the glory in his bloodline, this sacred martial artist instinctively resisted. How could he submit to a human being so easily? What's your name? Tell me, and I will not harm you. Zen's cold voice floated out again, as a golden light flickered faintly in his eyes. The warrior's chest pounded heavily, as he felt pressured and afraid. There were 6 great cultivation places in the Divine Refinement Forbidden Land. They included the Dragonflyer race's Valley of Time for breaking through cultivation levels, the Harmony race's Mind Refining Tower for state of mind cultivation, the Collapsing Mountain race's Strength Source for body cultivation, the Kaleidoscope race's Wind Exterminating Valley for laws cultivation, the Skyland race for the cultivation of pristine life vitality, and the Soul Seal race's Divine Soul Ancestral Land where warriors could cultivate souls. Among the 3 major kinds of cultivation, the soul cultivation was second to body and life vitality cultivations, and was the 3rd pillar supporting any martial artist. Naturally, it was an important link for any warrior. 7 out of 10 godly geniuses entered the Divine Soul Ancestral Land, but due to the limited time, Lawson, Carl and Lone had missed the opportunity to enter and were brought into the Valley of Time directly. Except for the Skyland race, Zen made extraordinary achievements in the 5 cultivation places. Presently, Zen's soul was flashing with a dazzling golden light. On the surface of his translucent soul, there were visibly cambered golden imprints. Such an imprint was regarded as the Emperor Soul imprint of the Divine Soul Ancestral Land. Those who possessed the Emperor Soul imprint could give off the formidable soul pressure through their aura, causing people to lose feeling. This allowed Zen to make people submit to him without fail. In the evolutionary universe, not many martial artists managed to cultivate and possess the gold fighting souls. There were only Supreme Lords and a small number of Grand World Lords who were able to do so. Zen's gold fighting soul was releasing a powerful pressure, and guaranteed a stronger effect when matched with the Emperor Soul imprint. Thoroughly, as he asked his question, the warrior trembled in his shoes. He subconsciously replied, My name is Aiden Long. Stop, Zen ordered again. Zen could suppress the warrior with strength, but used mere words to bring him into submission. He also had every intention of testing out what he had learned in the Divine Refinement Forbidden Land. Escaping was the instant thought of the warrior. However, as Zen uttered his words, the warrior struggled in fear and finally stopped. Aiden Long's eyes were fearful as he looked at Zen, no longer trying to resist. Which supreme world are we in? Zen asked calmly. Aiden Long's lips flickered with hesitation. However, he felt that his soul was being completely suppressed by Zen, as if he was in control of it. The words slowly fell from his lips. This is the 7 Ultimate World. 7 Ultimate World? Zen was slightly surprised. The 7 Ultimate World was a borderline world of the Humanity Alliance, and this world bordered the thoughtless minds. When Zen had left the evolutionary universe, the sacred race only occupied 3 of the supreme worlds of the spring race. If the sacred race attacked and occupied the 7 Ultimate World, wouldn't that mean that the entire Humanity Alliance was occupied? The situation was worse than he expected. In Zen's perspective, no matter how strong the sacred race was, it was impossible for them to completely occupy several thousand supreme worlds of the Humanity Alliance within 3 years. After all, every supreme world was vast and boundless. Supreme lords in the universe couldn't just stand by, without trying to defend their lands. And what about Supreme Lord of Oracle, Supreme Lord Helm, and Yolanda? Zen was lost in deep thought. He looked at Aiden Long and asked, what is the situation in the evolutionary universe right now? After he finished speaking, his eyes flashed with a golden glow. The Emperor aura from the Emperor's soul imprint shot towards Aiden Long, making him unable to resist. His eyes sank, and his teeth chattered. He could not withstand the pressure, not even to speak. Seeing this, Zen withdrew a portion of his soul pressure and continued, how is the situation? Our sacred warriors destroyed the Humanity Alliance and killed 3 supreme lords of the human race. The elites of the Humanity Alliance have already retreated to the thoughtless mines, Aiden Long choked out. Zen nodded. He knew the warrior was smart enough not to lie. What about the Demon Knight? The Demon Knight race already allied themselves with our sacred race. They originally planned to declare war on the thoughtless minds, but they were held back by the ogre race, Aiden Long replied. They were stopped by the ogres? Zen asked, surprise apparent in his eyes. Humans always liked beautiful things. Zen had a good feeling about the Demon Knight race, but he never thought that this race was Murphy's spy for the evolutionary universe. The Demon Knight and the Sorcerer race had the same goal, and they intended to subvert the entire evolutionary universe. The conflict between Zen and the ogre didn't stop in the lower world. Although the members of this race were brave, and they went against Zen several times, he did not expect that the ogre would stop the Demon Knight from taking action, becoming the aiding force for humans. This surprised Zen. At this point, Zen grasped the current state of the evolutionary universe and thought hard. He then looked back at Aiden Long and asked, why is there a blood rain here? Blood rain, blood rain. The warrior hesitated once again, unwilling to explain. If you don't want to tell me, I have many ways get it out of you. For example, soul searching, Zen threatened. If Zen wanted information, he could search the warrior's soul and retrieve what he needed. However, there was no need to go through so much trouble. All the color rushed from Aiden's face as he remained pale and silent. He knew Zen wasn't one to play games. That blood rain is of human blood. In order to prevent the members of the Humanity Alliance from taking back this place, we collect the human blood and cast the blood curse technique to pollute this place, he admitted. The reason he was unwilling to answer was not out of confidentiality, but because the sacred race's methods were always too cruel. He was afraid that Zen would kill him out of anger. This is a hell lot of blood. How many people have been killed? Zen asked, poking his finger into a red puddle and looking toward the sky. The human beings of one supreme world, Aiden Long replied, carefully observing Zen. Including mortals, right? Zen asked again. Aiden Long nodded in response. Right then, Zen's pupils slowly rotated and revealed the sharp beams, as if 2-inch-long daggers were embedded in the center of his pupils. Incredible anger rushed through him and took over his being. There were countless races fighting in the universe, and the lives of warriors were usually at risk in times like this. But the warriors knew a line had to be drawn. Innocent mortals did not deserve such treatment. In the eyes of mortals, the world of martial artists was only an illusion. Martial artists were immortal in their eyes. Battles among martial artists were always only between immortals and gods, without any interference or participation from mortals. Even when the battle between the thoughtless minds and the Humanity Alliance was extremely intense, the mortals of the Supreme World still led peaceful lives in their kingdoms. Only the wars among Supreme Lords accounted for the destruction of their worlds. Normally, it would never have to affect mortal kingdoms. The line had been crossed. The most brutal creatures would never have acted out this way, but the sacred race made themselves an exception. As everyone knew, the sacred race regarded mortal beings no different from animals. Killing hundreds of billions of mortals was nothing to them. They believed that all living beings were equal, but beneath them. Only their race was superior.